there for a few hours that night because it was, they were just, really, it was perfect ingredients. So, those, I think Hugo, the snow and, the tornado.
We'll return to Best of the Carolina Weather Group in a moment. Now your Carolina weather forecast. Here are today's forecast high temperatures for North Carolina. Here are the forecast lows for tonight for North Carolina. Here are tomorrow's forecast high temperatures. And here's forecast rainfall across North Carolina tomorrow. Here are the forecast highs for the day after tomorrow. And here's the forecast rainfall across North Carolina for the day after tomorrow. This is the total rainfall forecast across North Carolina for the next 3 days. Here's the severe thunderstorm outlook for today from the Storm Prediction Center. Here are the forecast high temperatures for today for South Carolina. Here are the low temperatures for today for South Carolina. Here's the probability of precipitation forecast across South Carolina today. And here are the rain chances across South Carolina tonight. Here are tomorrow's forecast highs across South Carolina. Here are the forecast low temperatures for tomorrow for South Carolina. And here is the probability of precipitation across South Carolina tomorrow. Here's the precipitation chances across South Carolina tomorrow night. Here are the forecast highs for the day after tomorrow in South Carolina. Here are the forecast low temperatures across South Carolina for the day after tomorrow. And here are the rain chances across South Carolina for the day after tomorrow. And South Carolina's probability of precipitation for that night. Here's the Storm Prediction Center's severe thunderstorm outlook across South Carolina for today through tonight. Here's the Storm Prediction Center's severe thunderstorm outlook across South Carolina for tomorrow and tomorrow night. And here's the Storm Prediction Center's severe thunderstorm outlook across South Carolina for the day after tomorrow through that night. Here's the severe thunderstorm outlook for today from the Storm Prediction Center. And now here's a live look at weather radar across the southeast.
Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Mandy Cohen, Secretary of the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services. And when you follow the 3 W's, you protect your family and your neighbors from COVID-19. When you leave your home, practice your W's. Wear a cloth face covering, wait 6 feet apart, wash your hands often. Wear, wait, wash. We're in this together. Stay strong, North Carolina.
Fight the spread and take a stand against coronavirus. Wear a mask in public. Stay at least 6 feet apart from others. And get tested. Join us and fight the spread. Visit scdhec.gov/COVID-19.
Getting tested for COVID-19 helps you to take the steps needed to protect yourself, your loved ones, and your community. Find the testing location at scdhec.gov/COVID-19 testing.
Deciding when to wear a mask isn't about who you know or how well you know them. Just ask yourself, will I be with anyone I don't live with? If the answer is yes, get behind the mask. Help slow the spread of COVID-19. Get behind the mask. Learn more at covid19.ncdhhs.gov.
You'll see your Carolina weather forecast at 25 and 55 past. And now back to the best of the Carolina Weather Group on the all-new Carolina Weather Net.
An adventure here.
Going back to Hugo, there's one other thing I wanted to ask. Even today, do you still see reminders of what happened when Hugo blew through?
You know, you do, actually, which is kind of interesting. I was on the Isle of Palms not too long ago, just about a week ago. I was out there, and there's still empty lots out there. Same thing on Sullivan's Island. There's still places where things never came back. It took about a year, to be honest with you. You know, when you think about, Florida and Michael and Mexico Beach and places like that, we see these storms, and we see the impact. Like we had Laura, and we had, everybody covering it. We had the storm chasers out there. I was watching Jim Cantore at 3 o'clock in the morning, and then, then the media, everybody goes away. But living through Hugo, I mean, we had to live with that for, forever. And certainly a year after that, it was a year until things got sort of back to normal. We didn't have power for 2 weeks, but it'd be interesting to go back. I think that'd be kind of an interesting documentary or something. You just go back to some of these places and say, okay, how are you doing a year later? How are you doing 2 years later? In particular, places like the Bahamas, right after Dorian. I mean, nobody really talks about it, but obviously, those islands, there was an incredible disaster. And it'd be interesting to go back to Freeport and back to Abaco and take a look at some of those places, because see how they're doing now. So I think to answer your question, there are things still around that you can tell that were pre-Hugo or post-Hugo. But we filled in quite a bit in 31 years.
I would echo your thoughts exactly, because even now, if you go and walk around, you look at some of these oak trees and pine trees, you can still see where most of these trees, they were blown over, they were popped in half, so to speak. So you can still see where the knottage is and where new limbs have grown over the years, but you can see where the disformation is in a lot of the trees still, even after all these years. So yeah.
Yeah, you really can. And there's a lot of people that live here that were here then, and they remember it. They remember surviving, getting through it, and things like that, rebuilding their house, or getting back to what was a house. So, it's one of those things that it's burned into your memory forever.
Yeah, I recall, I don't remember the exact percentage, but I remember hearing that a sizable percentage of the trees, of all the trees, were knocked down or badly damaged and would soon die in the wake of Hugo.
It was amazing. We were the morning after, we went back to the television station, and the pine trees were snapped at about maybe 20 feet up, 30, 25 feet up. They were all snapped almost at a uniformly, a uniform height, all in the same direction in one way, and then you'd see them all in the other direction, the other way, depending on where you were. And it was fascinating to look at the damage because it was just so widespread. But a lot of those trees were, the Francis Marion Forest was completely devastated. And it's been a long time, and it's still being, rebuilt. A lot of those newer trees, or some of those trees that have come back, it takes a while, obviously.
Bill, how was communicating the threats from Hugo, specifically the storm surge? We've made a lot of progress in the past 5 to 10 years of trying to explain what storm surge is and the areas it impacts. What was it like explaining the water that could come with a storm like that back in the late 80s?
So that was interesting because, that was before slosh models, and that was before, we had the LFM. And so, we didn't have a lot of the great, tools we have today. And at the time, remember, the Hurricane Center only went out 3 days. They didn't go out 5 days. And we didn't have, the Euro. We didn't have all of these great products that push us out, so many days in advance. So it was really kind of using that technology, what we had. But, letting people know about the storm surge was because it was kind of alien to these folks. They knew, remember, they haven't had a hurricane strike since, at least I think it was David maybe that came by in 79. Anyway, they hadn't had a major hurricane strike really since Hazel and Gracie way back in the 50s. They had some storms that came on up, but it was the first real major strike that could bring a major storm surge. So communicating that was interesting, and it was you had to kind of explain to people what it was, and a lot of people didn't think that they could see 20 feet of water. And I mean, there's a lot of people are saying, oh, they're overdoing it. and stuff like that. So getting that message out there was rather interesting.
So Bill, I want to ask you a little bit about kind of bring your military background and career into your meteorology broadcasting career, and specifically when hurricanes like Hugo or other kind of big events like that have occurred. Is there part of your military background that helps you communicate that or be present and structured in the way you assist with letting people know the threats?
Yeah, it does, Dan. I mean, what it does is it gives you, in the military, everything's about readiness, right? So when I was, when you're working on a staff or you're working as, whatever your job is in the military, everything is, especially in the reserve side of things, it's all about readiness. Are you trained up? Are you proficient in the software? Are you proficient in the forecasting? Is your staff ready for this? Is master control ready for this? Do they know how to put the crawls on? Do we know how to evacuate if we have to evacuate? There's, in military, there's a lot of readiness. We had to, you have to do a lot of training. And I think that kind of background also kind of floats over to what we were doing. And I still to this day have, readiness checklist for like tornadoes or tornado warning or severe weather, making sure our master control has, all of the things they need to make sure that they're ready to put us on TV at 2:00 in the morning if they have to. So, a lot of that comes from the military. Excuse me, that's Ruby. That's Ruby. So a lot of things come from the military background that go into television that help me, pretty much, get through these storms. But I think it's a good background. And military is a whole different world. When I was doing military, on the weekend, I'd go away, or even during the week, I'd be like, it's like literally changing hats. It's a whole different world of the way things are done. TV is a bit of show business. We got the science side of it, but there's show business, and it's a whole different world where military, it's totally different. So if you're briefing a commander, for example, on an upcoming storm, or you're doing a battle group command type of, if you're doing a forecast for a battle group, you're talking about, different types of weather, but, those people, it's a different audience. So, yeah. So you use that training, I think, to help you be ready. Readiness is the most important thing.
Well, that readiness was obviously very important in 1989 with Hugo, and it still is. Though we've talked about before on the show, in the unfortunate event that South Carolina and the South Carolina coast and Charleston area were to ever face another storm like Hurricane Hugo, how prepared are we nowadays in the Charleston metro for a major landfalling hurricane?
I think we're pretty well prepared. We're prepared, and we're at a point where we know what to do. We know how to get the messaging out there. We're prepared better than ever when it comes to communication between social media, the television, the OTT over-the-top stuff, all of the different platforms that we can broadcast to. So getting that word out is going to be even better. As far as evacuation and stuff like that, that is drilled pretty much every year. We have hurricane drills with the state and with the Highway Patrol and the National Guard and stuff like that. So I think South Carolina is pretty well prepared. There are some caveats. We flood on a good thunderstorm on a high tide down there. So, depending on, the timing of the storm, also the trajectory of the storm versus the coast, how much flooding that we could have. But, to get people to move, we had a big evacuation during Florence, and, that was a major, it was a Cat 1, actually. It was a major disruption. But it wasn't even a major hurricane as it came down the coast, but it was a rainmaker moving at 2 or 3 miles an hour, just flooding North Carolina and northeast South Carolina. But yet governor, had evacuation all the way down through, Beaufort County down into near the South Carolina-Georgia border. That, put a lot of people out saying, well, why am I evacuating? That storm's up near Myrtle Beach, and it's really flooding like Conway and not us. So, and a lot of that, we have to try to explain to people and say, we don't make the evacuation call. We tell you what's going to happen, weather-wise, what to expect. So in that reference, I think we can be ready. But there are always going to be, and I will guarantee you guys, there will be people that stay on the beach, and they did, and they have stayed through storms like Hugo or like Michael or like Laura and stuff, and they may or may not even survive, but they did. I remember during when we had a couple of storms in Florida, down in along the Keys, people staying. Oh, I'm staying through it. I'm staying through it, and then they come back to them like afterwards, like, I'll never stay again. Never. I'm out. I'm gone.
Talking about some of these climate change issues that we've had, certainly the sea levels are coming up. And, what has your perspective been on how, we've had to handle sunny day flooding since you started here going into now?
That's funny that you say that because, when we do have these 6.7, 6.8 tides on a beautiful sunny day, and you're trying to tell people we have a coastal flood advisory until 11 o'clock tonight. And they're like, it's not even raining. What are you talking about? And then all of a sudden, the pictures start showing up on Twitter of people's driveways being flooded and stuff like that, the drainage in the city. So sometimes it's hard to explain to people that, and it's people want simple answers sometimes, and sometimes it's hard to give a simple answer. And and there's not a lot of simple answers when it comes to weather. It can be complex, but even tides. When you talk about tides and talk about drainage, and you talk about some of the even the extreme low tides, why boats are sitting up on, when you have these blowout tides, boats are sitting up on the, on sand, and they're like, did you say that was going to happen? Well, yeah, we did, but don't, so it's, it's just a matter of really schooling people. And sometimes it takes people by surprise a lot of times.
It's difficult to communicate that sometimes too in the low country because you have a bunch of visitors. Like I remember when I was there for the NWA meeting in 2013, there was a king tide going on at the time, and you could go down East Bay Street, and there was an area that was flooded, and sometimes I think getting the word out to people who aren't local to the area and know this kind of thing can happen every now and then makes things even more challenging.
Yeah, that was a great meeting, by the way, Frank. We had a blast. That was a wonderful NWA meeting, and we'd love to have another NWA. We had an AMS meeting here too before that, and it's a great city for that. There's our shameless plug right there. We love to see everybody come back, but when we ever have conventions again. But yeah, I mean, it is, and it's hard to explain that to people that they say, hey, look, this is this is not a rain event. This is not this. We're not seeing a major storm along the coast. Why are we getting flooding? And it's a beautiful blue sky day. So a lot of it's education, and the TV folks will tell you all the time that, they give us 2.5 minutes to do the weather and say, oh, by the way, could you explain how this stuff works? So it can be, it's challenging. And I always, when I coach people and doing weather, I'm like, you're taking such a complex thing and you're making it simple, but you have to, you have to cherry pick the most important things and get, and let people know about them. What's good about today though, is that we have things like this podcast, things like social media, Facebook, and I'm sure you guys know, when we have big storms, and ask like Rob and everybody, Ricky will tell you, I mean, we're not only doing television, we're doing Facebook, and it's like, you'll do six shows, and they'll say, by the way, can you do another Facebook Live in a half hour? And it's like, wow, I just went through all this, but I have to go through all this again. But again, it's sometimes for a totally different audience. So, we're kind of schooling people along the way as well.
Well, Bill, besides the whole weather TV gig, besides the military gig, you've also done some writing, right?
I have. That's kind of like a hobby, more fun than everything. Yeah, I did. I write some novels, and had one come out recently. It was right before the COVID thing, so we were setting up these like we would do like Panera Breads from. We ended up going to different places to do some book events just to promote the book and whatnot, and then boom, COVID hit. Although we've been doing a lot, I've been doing some Zoom, what do they call them? book things, book events, like a lot of book clubs and things like that. But yeah, I wrote a novel when I was flying a lot for the Air Force. Really, I started thinking about this when I was Navy first, and when I went from the Navy to the Air Force, my job in the Air Force had me flying quite a bit in different places on C-17s, and so I started thinking about these stories and stuff like that I put together in a book and in a novel. We actually pitched it. My first book was pitched as it was more of a national security thriller, and it was pitched as a TV show. And my agent was like, you know what, this would be a good book if they don't buy it as a TV show. And they didn't go for the TV show, but the other people came up and said, we'd like you to do the book on it. So, so I've done a couple of books and three novels, and that's, it's fun. I mean, I don't do downtime very well sometimes, so I've got to be doing something. So I guess I write sometimes, and it's really kind of enjoyable. The last one I did, which was Uncle Danny, was actually based on 3 live characters up in New England that were really they were the kind of the tip of the spear when it came to the booze business and prohibition. They were probably the biggest movers of liquor in the Northeast in New York, and one of them was a great uncle of mine. So so I got to write a book about it. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
Kind of on your weekend job has become air shows and aviation and flying recently. That's actually kind of how we met and talked about things and knew each other better, was through kind of the aviation world. Talk a little bit about your time with the paratroopers and announcing for them and doing all the stuff with the team.
Yeah, I love doing the air show stuff, Ricky, and as you know, and you do too, and a lot of our folks do. So yeah, when I was my last job with when I was doing I was with Special Operations Command with the SOCOM, the Special Operations Command Paracommandos, and my job was kind of a threefold job. I was a DZSO, Drop Zone Safety Officer, I was a weather officer, and I was a public affairs officer. I kind of had 3 hats. So as part of that, I ended up doing a lot of they know I was in television, so I did a lot of the narrations of the jumps, either into stadiums, into air shows. We did a lot of football games and things like that. So I did that for almost 4 years. I was on the team, the Paracommandos team, and it was a blast. So I got me into the air show side of things. I've always been fascinated with air shows. Just from being a pilot, just from being part of aviation. So I started doing some air show announcing. And again, there's some big announcers on the air show circuit. They're fabulous and great friends of mine. And I just kind of fill in when there's a show available. I'll throw my hat in the ring if somebody needs an announcer. And I really like announcing air shows. It's fun. It's a lot of work, actually. It's a lot. I mean, it's a long day. You're usually up in the sun and stuff like that. But it really gets you into the aviation side of things, and it's fun. So I really like doing air shows. I've been working with Air Show 360, a team that does a lot of air show broadcasting. We're kind of trying to take that announcing thing and do like Air Show Live, which is another broadcast company that does air shows. So 360 is like that, is kind of like what we've been doing. So it's fun. It's an enjoyable side gig that I do every once in a while. It's a lot of fun.
Talk about how the aviation and weather kind of came together with the Paracommandos and the jump team. You mentioned you were kind of the weather officer. What do you have to look for before you give the go or no go to jump out of an airplane?
So you've got a couple of things. Ceilings, right? You got to have at least 2,000 feet. You also have to have wind. The wind at the surface has to be within a certain component. Like for a stadium, 13.5 miles per hour. And then like on an air show outside at an air show, we could go up to 18 miles an hour. We had to make sure that we were going to be clear of clouds. So they wouldn't, if we were doing a high jump or a high show, we wouldn't be coming through clouds because you can't bust a cloud. I'd be dealing with that. I'd be dealing with winds aloft a lot because of, where the exit of the airplane is going to be and, where they're going to be landing on the ground. A lot of like doing Navy weather, when you're doing strike weather, weather for, where a strike's going to happen. And that's interesting because you're actually, your airport's moving on an aircraft carrier. So you've got to do, your departure weather, your strike weather, your return weather, and the return weather may be completely different from where you left earlier that day. So it's kind of the same thing with the Paracommandos. The weather may change from the early show, like if you're doing 2 jumps in that air show, the morning show versus the afternoon show. So it's a constant look and change and tweaking of that. And then you also have to be able to call it off. I mean, the DZSO has the go no go. So you get a lot of responsibility. You have to, if you have to scrub it. If you have to cancel it, sometimes you have to do that as they're standing in the door of the airplane. So that can be kind of colorful, especially when you have the commander is a Green Beret lieutenant colonel who's very, very a lot of these guys they're all special operators. They're amazing people. and they live in kind of a different world than we do sometimes, because it takes a special person to be a special operator, and they are incredible. But and to tell them that, oh no, you can't jump because it's 14 miles an hour, not 13.5. So it can be, you'll be buying the drinks at the bar that night. So it's pretty fascinating. And then I got to jump with the team as well. As a tandem, I jumping with the team. It's pretty fascinating because you end up, and if you've never done this, it's pretty, and you should try it. It's a lot of fun. And I get to, jump with some friends of mine. I got Cantore to jump with us. In fact, we're supposed to meet up at the end of October for a skydive with him and some other folks down in Zephyr Hills. So, it is it's fast, it's fun, but you just have to be able to make that call sometimes where, it's a scrub. So that's the toughest part, is saying no to a bunch of special operators that don't usually get, weather doesn't bother them for anything they do, but because of the legalities of what we do as a performance team, you had to sometimes say no. So it's pretty fascinating.
If South Carolina were to be defined by one food, only one food, what would it be?
Shrimp and grits.
Shrimp and grits. Oh, I like that.
I agree.
You think so, Frank?
Absolutely. Frank? I love me some shrimp and grits. What's your favorite shrimp and grits down there in the Low Country?
Oh my goodness. There's Fleet Landing is very good. Actually, Poogan's Porch, probably some of the best, and they have the best biscuits in the world. They're about the size of a Volkswagen.
Best she crab soup too.
Yeah. Oh, the sheet crab's incredible, and those biscuits are as big as a Volkswagen. They're fabulous.
Bill, we've certainly appreciated your time tonight, and just great stories. And I can speak for all of us. We appreciate you always be willing to join us when storms are about to affect the Carolinas, and we always appreciate that. If our followers who are not in Charleston but travel to Charleston, or maybe they do live in Charleston and don't follow you yet, how can they find you on social media? So, yeah, anytime. My pleasure. Whenever a storm's coming, feel free to reach out. All of us down here are glad to jump on. We love the podcast. Rob, myself, everybody really, and Dave Williams. So the social media, it's just Bill Walsh TV for social media on the Twitter and Instagram side, and it's Bill Walsh Live 5 News on Facebook. Bill, we certainly appreciate your time, and thank you guys for watching and listening to the Carolina Weather Group. We'll catch you next time here on the podcast and the live streaming show. Welcome to the Carolina Weather Group. We're happy to have you this evening. Tonight we have a very special guest with us. Former FEMA Administrator Craig Fugate is joining us. And Craig, we welcome you to the show. We're happy to have you this evening. Appreciate you wanting to spend some time with us to talk all things weather. You've experienced a lot from your journey in Florida to all the way up into Washington, D.C., being the FEMA Administrator. So we look forward to hearing your conversations tonight. For those who are watching, feel free to follow along with us on social media. Tell us what you think about the show. Let us know if you have any comments. So, Craig, welcome to the show. Our first question to our guests who've never been on is, what is your weather journey? Do you have a weather story? But I'm just going to ask you, what is your journey? I know you started off in Florida where a lot of weather affects you, but did you have a little bit of a weather bug growing up, or was it all in emergency management?
No, I can remember as a kid, you used to get the hurricane tracking maps at the grocery store, and there'd be storms out there, and you'd turn on the NOAA radio and wait for the tropical forecast to come through, and you'd listen and get the coordinates and chart the map where the storm was, well before the internet and a lot of other tools that we just take for granted.
With that, at a young age, living in Florida, always keeping your eyes on the tropics, tell us about your journey through emergency management. I know we were talking a little bit off air. You started in a county and then kind of worked your way up. So tell us a little bit about that journey.
Well, my first experience with a hurricane, I was actually a paramedic here in my home county, Alachua County, Gainesville, Florida, where the University of Florida's at. when Hurricane Elena come buzzing through the Gulf of Mexico, and I was on duty for that shift. And we dealt with a storm that couldn't make up its mind and set off the coast for several days before it left. But I started out in 1987, moving from fire rescue to emergency management. Did that. Gainesville, sitting in the north part of the state, we get everything from severe thunderstorms is when we tend to see our most damaging storms. And so we would get...
We'll return to Best of the Carolina Weather Group in a moment. Now your Carolina weather forecast. Here are today's forecast high temperatures for North Carolina. Here are the forecast lows for tonight for North Carolina. Here are tomorrow's forecast high temperatures. And here's forecast rainfall across North Carolina tomorrow. Here are the forecast highs for the day after tomorrow. And here's the forecast rainfall across North Carolina for the day after tomorrow. This is the total rainfall forecast across North Carolina for the next 3 days. Here's the severe thunderstorm outlook for today from the Storm Prediction Center. Here are the forecast high temperatures for today for South Carolina. Here are the low temperatures for today for South Carolina. Here's the probability of precipitation forecast across South Carolina today. And here are the rain chances across South Carolina tonight. Here are tomorrow's forecast highs across South Carolina. Here are the forecast low temperatures for tomorrow for South Carolina. And here is the probability of precipitation across South Carolina tomorrow. Here's the precipitation chances across South Carolina tomorrow night. Here are the forecast highs for the day after tomorrow in South Carolina. Here are the forecast low temperatures across South Carolina for the day after tomorrow. And here are the rain chances across South Carolina for the day after tomorrow. And South Carolina's probability of precipitation for that night. Here's the Storm Prediction Center's severe thunderstorm outlook across South Carolina for today through tonight. Here's the Storm Prediction Center's severe thunderstorm outlook across South Carolina for tomorrow and tomorrow night. And here's the Storm Prediction Center's severe thunderstorm outlook across South Carolina for the day after tomorrow through that night. Here's the severe thunderstorm outlook for today from the Storm Prediction Center. And now here's a live look at weather radar across the southeast.
Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Mandy Cohen, Secretary of the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services. And when you follow the 3 W's, you protect your family and your neighbors from COVID-19. When you leave your home, practice your W's. Wear a cloth face covering, wait 6 feet apart, wash your hands often. Wear, wait, wash. We're in this together. Stay strong, North Carolina.
Fight the spread and take a stand against coronavirus. Wear a mask in public. Stay at least 6 feet apart from others. And get tested. Join us and fight the spread. Visit scdhec.gov/COVID-19.
Getting tested for COVID-19 helps you to take the steps needed to protect yourself, your loved ones, and your community. Find the testing location at scdhec.gov/COVID-19 testing.
Deciding when to wear a mask isn't about who you know or how well you know them. Just ask yourself, will I be with anyone I don't live with? If the answer is yes, get behind the mask. Help slow the spread of COVID-19. Get behind the mask. Learn more at covid19.ncdhhs.gov.
You'll see your Carolina weather forecast at 25 and 55 past. And now back to the best of the Carolina Weather Group on the all-new Carolina Weather Net.
Moving through straight line wind, stuff like that. Went to the state of Florida, dealt with a lot of weather-related events, but most notably the 04 hurricane seasons. And then I went to FEMA, and again, a lot of what FEMA responds to is weather-related disasters. A lot of flooding, tornadoes, Tuscaloosa, Joplin, hurricanes. Most notably was Superstorm Sandy. So pretty much throughout my career in emergency management, probably more than anything else, has been weather-related hazards.
Tell us a little bit about emergency management and FEMA and how they work together to mitigate after serious storms and other types of disasters.
Well, the first thing I think people need to understand that the reason we have emergency management in the first place is the org chart of government is not built for disasters. And that's true at the local, state, and federal level. So what's happened in the late 70s was the National Government Association began to realize that every one of these big events was almost reinventing wheels. It was never clear who the federal agencies were, what the roles were. It constantly changed. And that really drove the formation of FEMA under a reorganization order that President Carter issued. But the relationship is the way states are set up is they're the primary response to all disasters. Depending upon how that state's organized, generally our first line is local governments, mutual aid, state mutual aid with the federal government in case of FEMA, supporting governors. So every time I hear somebody saying, well, FEMA ought to be in charge, I remind folks, our government's actually a federal government where states have the primary role in domestic emergencies with the federal government supporting them. And I like to point out that if FEMA was in charge of everything, it would have been hard to imagine an agency that could have responded to all the disasters that we saw during my term there without the leadership role of the governors, because FEMA just couldn't have handled all that. It really is this idea that all disasters are local. It doesn't mean we're abandoning everybody, but there are key roles and responsibilities. But like I like to tell people, when the disaster hits, we all work as one team.
And so, Craig, how hands-on were you with some of these departments, like the Storm Prediction Center, the National Hurricane Center?
Well, I'll give you an example. Both at the state of Florida and at FEMA, our practice was when we had storm threats, we would have the National Hurricane Center, Storm Prediction Center. Sometimes, once we saw the rainfall forecast, Weather Prediction Center, relevant river forecast, and the affected National Weather Service offices all on those briefings. And I think, one of the things that I found when I got to FEMA was they were only talking to the Hurricane Center. And I'm like, you guys do realize there are other hazards, that there are forecast centers that deal with that. And the Weather Service in general, I think, really appreciated the fact that they finally had somebody that understood that the Hurricane Center isn't the only products that are being issued during these storm threats, and that, if we were seeing a significant flood risk from heavy rainfall, having the Weather Prediction Center now talking about that and amplifying that message.
What do you envision a response might look like to a hurricane in the age of coronavirus?
If you listen to what Mike said, and you go back several years ago and listen to him talking about hurricanes, he said the same thing. We've always recommended that people evacuate their friends and families, hotels and motels, and shelters as a last resort. So I think I'm less concerned about that messaging as the messaging we've been hearing, that people have been told to stay home, socially isolate, the risk of COVID, and not understand that if you're in an evacuation zone, you still need to evacuate. I think it gives more emphasis to the fact that we've always said friends and families are a much better option than shelters, that you don't have to go hundreds of miles. You just need to get inland, away from the storm surge areas. And the other message, which is kind of a tricky one, is we particularly in Florida, we've seen a lot of evacuations that aren't in evacuation zones. Essentially, people are trying to run away from the storm itself versus the storm surge. And Florida is trying to do some messaging around that of know your zone, know your home. That if you're not in an evacuation zone and your home's relatively in good shape, built to current codes, to consider staying home and putting up your shelters and riding the storm out. Again, reducing the number of people evacuate. But the biggest thing I'm telling people about this hurricane season is if you're in an evacuation zone, your plan is to evacuate, COVID or no COVID. And about the only real additions you need to make is add masks, hand sanitizer, disinfectants, and wipes to your go kits.
If you could find the disinfecting wipes. If anybody finds them, let me know. I will trade you toilet paper. I've got that, plenty of it.
What is your idea of what the plan is going to be for the rollout from emergency management perspective on shelters?
Well, the Red Cross and FEMA and the national organizations, volunteer organizations acting in disasters have a website. It's the National Mass Care Strategy website, where they've been updating information on mass feeding, congregate and non-congregate care shelter. Well, I'm an emergency manager. Congregate, non-congregate, what does that mean? Congregate care is your traditional mass care shelters where they're looking at how to screen, maintain social distancing, and minimize the spread of COVID in those shelters. But the other thing is looking at more utilization of hotels and motels, dorms, other spaces that usually weren't going to be picked for shelters. And I think there's an opportunity here. Everybody keeps telling me how hard it's going to be. And I'm like going, well, last time I checked, most hotels and motels are not really doing well. And FEMA will reimburse if you put people in hotels and motels. And I hear how hard it is to plan, but the reality is we have a lot of capacity, particularly in my home state of Florida, to put people up in hotels and motels. And FEMA will reimburse for that under protective measures. So we're still going to need mass care shelters. There's good information out there. It's updated fairly frequently as we learn more about COVID, and now that we're seeing cases increase. But the alternatives are, do you really want people not to evacuate because they're so fearful they have nowhere to go? Or do you prepare the shelters and understand that you're going to have to manage that with COVID and take the steps to minimize the spread?
Craig, the current administrator to FEMA testified earlier today before Congress. We're taping this, but today, earlier on the 22nd of July, you had an opportunity as well to provide some feedback to members of Congress. What did you tell them about what you're seeing in the state of the ongoing coronavirus response?
Well, I think, again, my emphasis was on evacuations. We need to be clear about that and not mix messages with talking about how dangerous and confusing and everything else it's going to be, and really focusing on when you're in the storm surge area. That's the primary threat. We need to evacuate, and we need to acknowledge COVID, but we shouldn't use COVID as a reason not to evacuate. So we need to clear that communication up. But secondly, we know that moving people is a vector, and everybody talks about evacuations. I said, well, the other problem is going to be on the response. We're still going to need to move utility crews. We're still going to need to move search and rescue crews. But if you think about a lot of these disasters, we see a lot of volunteers moving. And that may not be our best tool. And everybody says, well, what are you going to do? I says, well, I don't know about you, but we got pretty high unemployment rates right now in Florida. So my question is, and having done this for a long time, there's not that much that requires people to have extensive training to be able to help in a disaster. And again, it's reimbursable. Why don't we hire people and put them to work locally? We've already seen this with COVID in states where local governments had actually hired restaurants to cook and prepare meals under contracts to feed people that were shut in or isolated or couldn't get to stuff. And again, I don't ever want to say we don't use volunteers, but I also think with the unemployment rates we have, particularly in the hospitality industry, I think there's opportunities to employ those folks during disasters to minimize the amount of people we have to bring in from outside of a community, but more importantly, start putting money back in the economy.
So let me ask you this one, Craig, because in your experience in not only preparing or helping communities prepare for disasters, but helping them afterwards too, I'm curious where your expertise and your opinion lies on the whole question of schools. Do you have an opinion or thought on whether kids should be going back to the classroom at this point?
This is going to be a hard one because I always like to talk about big numbers. You know, everybody said, well, there's little risk. You know, kids don't generally get that sick. You know, we need to get the economy going. We need to get kids back in school. It's important for development. And I'm like, nobody's really answering this question. If the rate at which kids get sick and potentially the rate at which kids have serious complications or deaths are even like small percentages, like less than 0.1%. You're talking about thousands of children going back to school. Those are real people, and those are real numbers. And I don't think we have a good answer for that. I also think that there is opportunities to look at how we go back to the classroom setting. You know, everything from a lot of schools don't have enough room to do social distancing. So what if we split the day in half and we split the school up where half the school goes in the morning, half the classes go in the afternoon? What if we started doing more classrooms, weather permitting, outside? You know, and again, because we're learning more about this is airborne and, you know, why masks are so critical in minimizing spread, you know, how is that going to all happen? And I'm not sure we have enough answers because in Florida, some of the schools will open up, you know, in the middle of August. So I think it would be prudent to think this through, get some consensus on ways to do this. And again, I just don't think saying you're going to open schools is the answer. But I also don't think that keeping schools closed indefinitely is going to work either.
Shifting gears a little bit, you're passionate about the resilience divide. I see this here in Charleston a lot, where we have, you know, sunny day flooding, and it often affects places that are less affluent than places that are more affluent. A lot of the more affluent places are getting, you know, they're getting some of the things like check valves. They're getting a seawall at the battery. But meanwhile, at the corner of Haggard and Fishburne, where there's low-income housing, you see at 6.8 feet tides, you start to see the creek overflow and start flowing across the road there. Several, you know, we had 80-something coastal flood events last year. So let's talk a little bit about that resilience divide and how we can maybe bridge that.
Well, the resilience divide is really how I'm trying to talk about the current process of using cost-benefit analysis to make decisions about investing in mitigation and building projects, particularly for future climate impacts, as well as the existing impacts we're already seeing. And so much emphasis is on how many tax dollars we save. You probably heard this, that for every dollar we invest, we save anywhere from $4 to $9. And so if you're looking at dollars, you'll actually save more money the more valuable the homes are that you're trying to protect. And lower income homes, working class communities don't score as well. So the bias, I don't think, was intended to short the most vulnerable communities, but by only looking at the cost benefit analysis of dollars saved versus dollars invested, we're going to see that divide go towards the more affluent communities, particularly those that can afford the cost share match of, in many cases, a minimum of 25% against the federal dollars. And I think we need to broaden the definition of cost benefit analysis to actually talk about the functional impacts to families and communities, not just to dollars saved on property.
Jared, I want to take what you just said and talk about Charleston and the resilience divide and just roll that into talking about climate change and climate change adaptation. Craig, what does that look like from a FEMA standpoint?
Climate's already changed. I think one of the problems we have is we keep talking about climate change as something that's going to occur in the future. And quite honestly, that's the way we talked about it in the majority of the Obama administration, was something that we're going to deal with in the future. But when Sandy hit, President Obama, and we'd already seen a lot of tornado and flooding activity and a pace that we'd not seen before. And we kept getting these record-setting events, which I remind people, if it's record-setting, we've never measured it before. And these weren't just isolated incidents. It was like a drumbeat. And the president said something that really, I think, shaped where we were going to go at FEMA. He says, you know, the discussion about climate change is over. We need to start talking about climate adaptation. And the problem is our infrastructure was built for the past century of weather-related events. And climate is changing faster than our ability to keep up with infrastructure, to keep up with the improvements needed. And this is why I think it's so important as we talk about federal investments, big infrastructure, federal highway bill, HUD dollars, the alphabet soup of funding, including the FEMA disaster dollars. We have got to move away from building to our last 100 years worth of weather data and start building the future risk. And I think there are more and more people that get that we can't keep building the way we've been building if we're going to survive. But I think there's some urgency that as much as people talk about reducing greenhouse gases, on our end of the spectrum, I think the change has already happened and we're not going back anytime soon. So adapting to what's happened, particularly our coastal communities, areas subject to flooding. We know that the extreme rainfall events is one of the clearest signals we've seen in the last decade from climate impacts. And we are way behind on both identifying, mapping, and explaining that risk, and then making the investments to start bending that curve.
And I want to kind of back up a step in keeping that same direction. We talked about Horry County. We talked about some of these areas that have been hit very hard by the watershed events from the hurricanes that have hit. Over time, things have built up, Matthew, and so on and so forth. Things have just gotten worse and worse over time. So these property values are down, and we get back to the resiliency divide and demographics. And so what is being done to help those that are less fortunate in the lower income or the lower value homes, per se, that can't get back the dollars that they put into their home, ones that that's their total investment. And then others are getting funded for their properties, whereas these folks over here are not. Where's this going to be bridged at some point in the future? What's the plan for that?
It hasn't, and that's one of the reasons I think we need to draw attention to it. The Miami Herald ran an article a couple of months ago that looked at the National Flood Insurance Program, their buyout program, where they go in and buy homes out that are repetitive loss. And they found that there was a definite bias that a lot of that money went to the wealthier counties, not necessarily the most vulnerable communities. And I think that's why we need to talk about the resiliency divide. We need to get Congress to get behind this and really look at funding an adequate buyout program and focusing on the vulnerable populations, not just the property values or the cost savings that we may see in more affluent properties.
How in tune is Washington to how weather affects people? We live here in the Carolinas, the Charlotte metropolitan area, Winston-Salem, Greensboro. Over 2 million people live in that general area, and there's no adequate radar coverage to detect tornadoes, flash flooding. We hear these stories of folks who are continuing to have homes flooded, and they're not really getting the attention we need. Is this something that the Washington culture, the senators, the House representatives, they kind of push the weather and what it does off to the side? I know everything should be focused on, but do you think sometimes weather and their issues kind of get pushed to the side a little bit?
A little bit. The only time they get serious about weather is when there's a catastrophic failure in their district. I mean, think about it. The Weather Service couldn't even get a supercomputer to run better models until after Hurricane Sandy or Superstorm Sandy showed how inadequate their computational powers were. So unfortunately, everything from getting WSR 88s, which was the result of several airplane crashes due to microshear, to the latest funding for the Weather Service in this Superstorm Sandy stimulus package, Washington tends to be reactive. And so until a member gets hit in their district, then it becomes a big issue. But overall, most people treat the weather, and again, it was always amazing to me, members of Congress that thought you could defund the Weather Service because you had other private meteorologists issuing forecasts, and the Weather Service shouldn't be competing with them. And they actually were promoting defunding the Weather Service and letting other organizations do it.
Craig, do you think we have a radar crisis on the horizon?
I think if we're serious about being able to rapidly detect fast-moving tornadoes, particularly now the warning systems have caught up with the forecasting. Just having better resolution on forecast, but we can't tell people more precisely, I don't think would have been a good match. But if you think about it now, we're moving away from county-wide warnings to polygons. We now have, with the weather, the wireless emergency alerts, the better ability to geocode cell phones, and now moving past the original 120 characters to start including links in that, we can actually now issue across cell phones more detailed warnings from the Weather Service than their current technology can really do. And they've been migrating that way. So now they can do polygon warnings, yet they're still basing it upon radar technology that will miss part of that. There's still gaps in that coverage. And everybody forgets, unless you're in severe storm mode, those things are scanning. Everything you're seeing is delayed. It's not what's actually happening. So, we've seen this before where the tornadoes will actually drop, hit, and pop back up before the radar completes its circle and it gets the updated forecast information. So by the time you see a hook echo, it's already done its business and dropped back in the sky.
Well, Craig, I want to transition us away from this last topic, and as we're kind of running short on time here, talk about something that is near and dear to all of our hearts here at the Carolina Weather Group, the Waffle House Index. That's something that we've talked about before. We had the PR director, Pat Warner, from Waffle House on last year in 2019 to discuss what exactly it is from the Waffle House perspective, but I'd like to hear about it from the FEMA perspective and how the Waffle House Index works its way all the way up to the president.
Well, FEMA will tell you that the Waffle House Index really isn't their index, and that was just me trying to be folksy. But it actually started in Hurricane Charlie. I'd been out on several disasters, and the thing I could just it was just accepted was if there was anything open, it was going to be a Waffle House. But in Charlie, we had gone down to Charlotte County, and I ended up staying down there for about 2 weeks. So we'd get up around 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, try to find something to eat, and we'd spend the rest of the day working. And, we're doing 18-hour days, so if you didn't get breakfast, you may not eat. The first morning we get up, we were down near Fort Myers. We had to get on the interstate and head south because there was nothing open where we were at. And the first thing we get to is Waffle House. We go in and sit down, and this lady comes out with a mimeograph menu. You're so used to the big plastic menus. I already knew what I was going to order. But she says, the only thing we have is on this. And that was like, well, okay. And so we ordered, but, we got coffee, we got our eggs, we got a good breakfast. But it wasn't everything you would normally expect there. Next morning, we get up, and the actual interchange we're at, now Waffle House was now open. Went in there, same deal, mimeograph menu. So the folks I was with, Ben Nelson, who was our state meteorologist in 2004, he's now with the Jacksonville Weather Service office as a forecaster there. And at that time, Major Tad Warfel, now Colonel Warfel of the Florida National Guard, with me. And we were color coding the counties after Charlie, red, yellow, and green, using a stoplight to show indicators, EOC activation, search and rescue, schools, stuff like that. And they put into the slide deck the Waffle House Index. And that's where it came from. Green was open with a full menu, yellow was open with a limited menu, and red was closed. And I guess it would have stopped there, except we had changed how we operated in Florida. We weren't waiting for the counties to do assessments to say they needed help after these hurricanes, because I kept asking, well, why don't we just respond like it's bad? We'll get there faster, and if they don't need us, we'll go home quicker. Well, the question was, if you're responding out on the Panhandle, like with Hurricane Ivan, and you're driving out I-10, and literally we were going right as soon as the hurricane force winds passed, I told guys, we're going to be safe, but we ain't going to stay dry. We're not waiting for blue skies. So we were going right as the storm was moving out. And the question was, where do you stop? And that was kind of how the Waffle House Index got used. If you got there and the Waffle House was open, it ain't bad. Keep going. If you get there and the Waffle House is open, but they got a mimeograph menu, well, we're dealing with power outages. We probably got a lot of mass care issues. But for the search and rescue teams, don't stop. Keep going. If you get there and the Waffle House is closed, that's going to be pretty bad. Go to work. And it just kind of became the shorthand. In Florida, it seemed like all these hurricanes going across the interstate, the Waffle House was a pretty good indicator of what was happening. And the other thing, because we never really talked to the Waffle House, about them getting open and all the stuff they do to stay open. It was just our shorthand for where do we stop and go to work when we're driving in the areas, because you'll start seeing damages 100 miles out with a hurricane, but that's not where the impacts are the worst. And so it just became a shorthand for us of where do you go to work in a hurricane?
So I got to ask, Craig, what's your go-to meal at Waffle House? I mean,
New York strip steaks. I like the steak and eggs, scrambled eggs, hash browns, scattered and smothered, black coffee.
And if you're on the limited menu, what do you go with?
Scrambled eggs, omelets, whatever they got. I'm not picky if they got a limited menu. But generally they'd have eggs and bacon, stuff like that. The funniest thing was when I was in Joplin. We got out there. I was actually on the West Coast, had to fly back into Joplin, got there late at night. We did a whole bunch of interviews the next day. I've been running in about 3 hours.
We'll return to Best of the Carolina Weather Group in a moment. Now your Carolina weather forecast. Here are today's forecast high temperatures for North Carolina. Here are the forecast lows for tonight for North Carolina. Here are tomorrow's forecast high temperatures. And here's forecast rainfall across North Carolina tomorrow. Here are the forecast highs for the day after tomorrow. And here's the forecast rainfall across North Carolina for the day after tomorrow. This is the total rainfall forecast across North Carolina for the next 3 days. Here's the severe thunderstorm outlook for today from the Storm Prediction Center. Here are the forecast high temperatures for today for South Carolina. Here are the low temperatures for today for South Carolina. Here's the probability of precipitation forecast across South Carolina today. And here are the rain chances across South Carolina tonight. Here are tomorrow's forecast highs across South Carolina. Here are the forecast low temperatures for tomorrow for South Carolina. And here is the probability of precipitation across South Carolina tomorrow. Here's the precipitation chances across South Carolina tomorrow night. Here are the forecast highs for the day after tomorrow in South Carolina. Here are the forecast low temperatures across South Carolina for the day after tomorrow. And here are the rain chances across South Carolina for the day after tomorrow. And South Carolina's probability of precipitation for that night. Here's the Storm Prediction Center's severe thunderstorm outlook across South Carolina for today through tonight. Here's the Storm Prediction Center's severe thunderstorm outlook across South Carolina for tomorrow and tomorrow night. And here's the Storm Prediction Center's severe thunderstorm outlook across South Carolina for the day after tomorrow through that night. Here's the severe thunderstorm outlook for today from the Storm Prediction Center. And now here's a live look at weather radar across the southeast.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Mandy Cohen, Secretary of the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services. And when you follow the 3 W's, you protect your family and your neighbors from COVID-19. When you leave your home, practice your W's. Wear a cloth face covering, wait 6 feet apart, wash your hands often. Wear, wait, wash. We're in this together. Stay strong, North Carolina.
Fight the spread and take a stand against coronavirus. Wear a mask in public. Stay at least 6 feet apart from others. And get tested. Join us and fight the spread. Visit scdhec.gov/COVID-19.
Getting tested for COVID-19 helps you to take the steps needed to protect yourself, your loved ones, and your community. Find the testing location at scdhec.gov/COVID-19 testing.
Deciding when to wear a mask isn't about who you know or how well you know them. Just ask yourself, will I be with anyone I don't live with? If the answer is yes, get behind the mask. Help slow the spread of COVID-19. Get behind the mask. Learn more at covid19.ncdhhs.gov.
You'll see your Carolina weather forecast at 25 and 55 past. And now back to the best of the Carolina Weather Group on the all-new Carolina Weather Net.
It's now about 6 p.m. We're heading back to our hotel for the first time. And there's a Starbucks. And all these cars are parked around the Starbucks. I'm like, hey, guys, just pull in. I need a coffee. And we pull into the Starbucks. It's closed. We couldn't figure out why all the cars were there. Then we realized they didn't turn their Wi-Fi off. So folks in Joplin they were just trying to get connections were circled around there. So we went back to our hotel. There's a Waffle House right there. I'm like, we're going in there. I know they got coffee. And sure enough, you go into the Waffle House, they got coffee because they're pouring bottled water into the coffee makers. Because all of Joplin was under boiled water orders. But Starbucks was closed, Wi-Fi was on. Waffle House, they're just pouring bottled water in those coffee makers making coffee. So I got my coffee.
So switching gears, Craig, I wanted to ask you, are there any memorable moments that stick out in your mind while you worked at FEMA? For example, the 2011 tornado outbreak in Alabama or Superstorm Sandy, anything like that?
Yeah, it was the Tuscaloosa tornado outbreaks was pretty impressive. And again, we came into Birmingham, picked up a Black Hawk, and I was flying up to the northern part of the state. And I don't think people realize how bad the northern tier of the Alabama counties got hammered. TVA had major transmission lines ripped out. We went to one town. They were basically lost everything. They had brought a command post from the southern counties. They used to go the other way during hurricanes. They'd all go south. But that thing, everybody from the south was going north. And they literally had 911 in this mobile command post, and they were dispatching. And everything, all their equipment was lined up on the side of the road because the station was just gone. And I remember, the president was coming in. He gets on, how bad it is. I'm trying to describe it, but it really was. It was hard to describe. He got there, he saw it, and that kind of came shorthand. So Joplin happens, and I'm on the ground in Joplin. I get the same call. He's going to come in a couple of days. He was always very respectful that he didn't want to get there when it would interfere with the response because he knew what happens when he comes in as far as security and stuff like that. But he didn't want to wait too late. So it was always, the governor, working with local officials, and essentially, my recommendation. So he's calling me about Joplin, and he's going, how is it? And I says, it's worse than Tuscaloosa. And he's like, worse? And I have to say, Joplin, as far as total devastation, is the first time I've seen total devastation. When you were down where that hospital was, think about a tornado that's powerful enough to rotate a steel frame building and actually turn it. Literally the area a mile wide, close to 10 miles long, varying in width. Anything in there was totally destroyed. Anything outside of it pretty quickly got to the point where you didn't even know a tornado hit. And I just remember that, describing it to him, and he's going, how bad is it? I said, it's worse than Tuscaloosa. And he was just taken aback because the impacts in Tuscaloosa were pretty dramatic. And I'm like, yeah, it's worse here in Joplin.
Well, Craig, one last question, kind of a fun question. You kind of, a little bit discussed it just a few seconds ago. You and President Obama, Vice President Cheney, you're sitting around. Did y'all ever talk about weather? Weather's a thing that a lot of people talk about. Did you guys just ever, talk about the weather, what's going on?
No, but, between I went out on a couple of disasters with Vice President Biden, and I remember going up into Scranton, Pennsylvania. And it was really funny because he's like, Craig, these are my people. And I knew he was from the area, but I didn't realize that, people on the street knew Joe and called him that. I'm like, Mr. Vice President. They go, hey, Joe, how's your, I haven't seen you. And Joe would be going, how's your grandfather, your dad, cousin, uncle? He knew people. So that was the thing that really struck me about Vice President Biden was in a lot of these communities we go into, he had a very personal connection, and particularly in that part of the country, they knew he was from there. They knew the families. They knew each other. President Obama, I remember two things. One, I was meeting him down in New Orleans. It was the anniversary of Katrina, and he's asked me how it's going. I said, well, we got hurricanes in the Pacific, hurricanes in the Atlantic, and fires in between. And he just looks at me and says, you're a smart ass. I'm like, hey, I'm just reporting what's happening. But the other cool thing about the president was I was told early on that they wanted me to wear my logo wear when I was at the White House during disasters. So during Matthew, I'm giving a briefing to the president in the Oval Office, wearing khakis and my FEMA logo shirt and my FEMA windbreaker, and everybody else is in suits. And there's this great picture of the president. I'm sitting next to the president wearing my blazer and my logo wear. Everybody else in suits for the briefing, and people said, "How do you get away from that?" Everybody else dressed up to go in there says, they basically told me to look like I was doing what I was supposed to be doing. So I wore what I wore when I was at FEMA headquarters when I went to the White House to brief. In fact, if I was wearing a suit, they'd always look at me kind of excused. I said, hey, this is camouflage. When I'm wearing a suit, I just blend in with everybody else running around with a White House badge.
We certainly enjoyed having you. If you have a website, social media that account or anything like that our listeners and people who are viewing this can follow, how can they do that?
Well, I tweet a little bit. I guess that's you should be aware of that. So
that's how we met. Yes.
No, I'll tweet it, Facebook it, and LinkedIn it. Again, I've seen you guys out there. I've just thrilled to be invited.
Hey,
now I feel like I made it. I've been on the weather group,
Well, we appreciate your time, and again,
I just sent Marshall Shepard an email says, I've been on your podcast, but it wasn't half as much fun as the Carolina.
Craig, thank you for being with us tonight. Interesting conversation, and folks, again, it's very important to know the risk as we enter the COVID season or the hurricane season mixed in with the COVID, and hopefully you'll take Craig's advice as you prepare. So until next time, we hope you have a great week, and we'll see you back here on the Carolina Weather. Everyone, welcome to the Carolina Weather Group. We're happy to have you this evening. Welcome to another episode, and tonight's going to be a fun episode. I'm going to go ahead and apologize. I hope I don't talk too much because we're combining weather and sports, and when we do that, it really makes me happy. Tonight we have on with us Sean Bratton and Mike Ventrisi from the Fantasy Football Weather Guys, and if you play fantasy football, you may have never thought about the weather element to it. And so tonight, we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk about the product and how you can follow along throughout the year so your fantasy football team is up to par and potentially beating the rest of your people who are not thinking about the weather. So we're happy to have Sean and Mike on with us tonight. And guys, we appreciate your time. We'll go ahead into the conversation since both of you guys are first-time guests with us. We always start off our questions like this. We want to know how you got kind of caught up into the weather bug, the weather story. So, Mike, what is your weather story? And then we'll let Sean tell his weather story.
Hey, thanks so much for having us, guys. This question always comes up, and it always starts off with, it's usually always the same answer, right? It's some kind of high impactful weather event that has just kind of brought us into the field. So I grew up on Long Island, New York as a kid, and ended up experiencing Hurricane Bob in 1991. So it knocked out our power. I'm like, what is going on outside? I originally wanted to be a veterinarian, and I would go home and watch the Weather Channel after that hurricane, just watching Cantore on there with during the season. And I realized I should probably change profession pathways and go into that meteorology just because of how nerdy I was just kind of sitting out under an umbrella watching a thunderstorm. So, but it was Hurricane Bob that really got me into that passion, and that's pretty much why I ended up getting a PhD in tropical meteorology.
Yeah, so I didn't grow up too far from where Mike grew up. I grew up in New Milford, Connecticut, so it's in Litchfield County, Connecticut, and I actually still remember this day very vividly. I was in first grade, and we were on our, getting ready to pack up and go home, but they didn't let us because we had a tornado warning. So I was basically plastered my face to the window, looking at these ominous clouds and the rain, and I was just like in awe the entire time. Everyone else was scared. I was there up on the window, wondering what the heck was going on. And we were actually kept after school for quite some time until the night, until things got cleared up. We did have a tornado touchdown near our school in Litchfield, Connecticut. So it was a really cool event. And then also the blizzard of '96 was a big high impact weather event that happened in early January of '96. That was a big event for me. I remember that. We had off school, and it was we had like 24 to 30 inches of snow. So it was a really cool event too. And then of course, I'm sure you hear this a lot, but the movie Twister came out, and that kind of sealed the deal for me after watching that.
We were talking off air, but we've done this show for a while, and it seems like that there's a common denominator there with Twister and how many people is brought into this industry because of the movie. Yep. Like us, we all have our other weather day jobs, and we kind of do Carolina Weather Group, for fun, and that's what you guys do with the fantasy football weather guys. Tell us about what you do in your daytime jobs. I know you guys are both connected in the weather industry as well.
Yeah, so I guess I'll start off. And so I work currently for the weather company, which is owned by IBM. When I started my career there, I dabbled with a lot of energy forecasting, pretty much providing weather information to folks who were trading natural gas futures and some of the utilities. But since IBM has stepped into the picture here, I've been transitioned into more of a, I guess you could say, an analyst. My title is a meteorological engineer, essentially, where my main goal in the company now is to make sure that our forecast offerings are the number one most skillful product out there. So it's been a lot more of data engineering, software engineering, and playing with Twitter on the side, pretty much. It's kind of how it's evolved.
For me, I'm actually I teach AP Physics at a school called Lane Tech here in Chicago. So I teach honors in AP Physics, and then I also teach at the College of DuPage. I teach some weather and climate courses there.
This is very cool. And so, Sean, that's something weather. It seems like a lot of people are interested in, but you're actually teaching these kids. We'll get into fantasy football, but I find this really unique.
Yeah.
What is it like teaching kids weather? I mean, as something I know we all get to go out and do school talks, but you're actually maybe talking to high schoolers, college kids. Yep. What's the field like right now? I mean, is there a lot of interest in weather?
Yeah, so I have taught at the high school level and the college level. And in both of those cases, people are just kind of taking it as a gen ed, right, to take that credit. But one of the things that I found is the application of the content really goes a long way. So if you're going to sit there and just read off some slides, they're going to go to sleep. But really getting them involved with the weather, looking at current events, looking at maps. I had students typically do their own map discussions, run their own map discussions once we get into forecast mapping and all of that stuff. And they really seem to enjoy that. And there are a lot of students that have become avidly interested in weather as a result. I have a few people really interested in climate, some more in synoptics and in mesoscale meteorology. That's been really cool. We also do kind of like these little trips. The National Weather Service locally here will do balloon launches. And they'll kind of go and kind of experience that, which is a really cool experience for them. But it's really cool. I mean, really just it's a really cool science to bring to life because you experience it every day. And students really enjoy that aspect of actually being able to experience the weather, make your own forecast, and kind of making it come to life.
That's very true. Well, let's talk about fantasy football, weather. I told you guys before I play fantasy football, but never really put the concept together until I came across your product. So tell us how did you guys become about? I mean, how did this website blog? I know you guys do a podcast now. How did you guys come about putting the product together?
Yeah, we Sean and I have been talking about fantasy football and the weather component for a number of years. We've kind of gone back and forth and just saying, hey, did you see that snow game? Roethlisberger threw 4 interceptions. He was projected to be the number 1 quarterback of the week. What just happened there? It's been, just kind of this informal thing for a while.
Yeah.
And it's kind of evolved throughout the year, a couple of years now. We've been essentially, in a nutshell, Sean and I are probably the most competitive people you'd ever meet. And we need to be, essentially, we're competitive with everyone else. We're also really competitive with each other. So we want to try to find any edge that we can when essentially trying to optimize our lineups on a given week. And I think this is kind of how it spawned out, Sean. What would you
think? It's kind of funny because Mike and I first started listening to this fantasy football podcast, and we would be always going back and forth. And there's one thing that they always brought up, like, hey, you could become a part of our league of record, meaning you can join their fantasy football league. And these guys are big time. They're all over the place. Everyone knows them. That's in the fantasy football community, the fantasy footballers. And we were like, hey, I wonder what would it take for us to actually be able to be part of their league? And we were like, well, we're really in tune with the weather and what's going on week to week. Maybe we can trade our experience with weather and letting them know what the forecast is, and maybe they'll let us be in our league. And so Mike and I were actually kind of just pitching this idea, and we're like, wait, as Mike explained, we were thinking about all these events in which weather has played a major role, and we're like, we may have something here. And so last August, essentially, we were like, hey, let's do this. So Mike threw together a website. He's like, all right, we're going to meet at this time every week, do a forecast, and make projections for players. We had a data set we were able to work with at the time, and then we brought on our friend Colin, who's kind of our producer and behind the scenes guy, and our host, exactly. And he's been kind of doing stuff on the side, and it just kind of gained momentum during big weather impact games. We would get people on Twitter and asking us for advice and what was going on, and it's kind of built. And now we're at a point where we brought on Nick Schiraldi, who also has a PhD in meteorology, and he's working on our quantitative statistical analysis package and user interface on our website to really kind of nail down those numbers, and as Mike mentioned, that kind of give you the edge. So it's just a really cool thing that we kind of were like, hey, let's just try it out, see what happens, and it's kind of gained some momentum over the last year or two.
I just want to say one quick thing. All the fantasy football weather guys we just mentioned, we're all University of Albany alumni guys. So that's our deep root connection.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and share your website. Let's take a look at what you guys have created here. And I mean, this is pretty impressive because it looks like you guys have developed your own modeling within for the continental United States, what we call CONUS. And so you have U.S. winds and precip primarily for these, with the key, of course. And it looks pretty simple to understand for the average person, right? I mean, for lay terms, this will show a forecast. If we take like west wind, if we have games out west, I assume there's a little bit of a learning curve here, but who came up with this idea, and how does it help enhance your the experience for fantasy football if folks want to get plugged into the weather to maybe determine their outcomes?
Yeah, so when we were thinking about these to try to bring up some kind of weather maps here, the first thing we thought about is how do we identify where the stadiums are for people to see what type of weather impacts they could actually be. So essentially, wherever you see those circles with the X in the middle, that's essentially the location of a stadium that actually is predicted is in the upcoming week of games. So you can see here that the Titans there must have a game coming up here. So those stadiums will actually change each week depending on where the home game is. So if you see a little circle with a dot in the middle, that's actually a game where a home game that usually has like a cover on it, so a dome or some kind of retractable roof, so weather won't be an impact there. But the way that we wanted to really get these maps to be helpful is when there are high weather impacted events, those circles will change colors. So you can see often when an area of heavy precipitation or some stronger winds moves in, you'll see that circle turn to an orange, or even a red. So like the orange would represent there's a possibility of some impactful conditions from weather if there's a football game taking place during that hour forecast lead you're looking at. If it turns red, it means there's a high chance for some impacts.
If I were to pick east wind and go forward,
you can just go forward.
We would see, there's orange right there. So we're showing the folks out there, if you just hit forward on these buttons, you'll see these impacts in time. And I'm trying to see how far out these go. Do these go out?
Yeah. They'll go all the way to Sunday. I think recently, the most recent model run, 18Z on Sunday. Yeah, we got right there. We got one in Miami. I think they're supposed to get some precipitation and maybe some wind. And so I think it was around 0Z Monday or 18Z Sunday for this upcoming week. I think that's the only caution that we have for upcoming weeks. It's going to be a relatively quiet week this week, but
there it is right there. So it popped up. Looks like Tuesday evening. So it looks like that timeline got pushed back a little bit. But yeah, I mean that's pretty neat how you've integrated weather into forecast impact for a specific area, and it could be anything. It could be anything going on for that area too. So football games in particular, but that's pretty neat. I really like that format. Now tell us a little bit about the fantasy impact table.
Yeah, sure. So this is a table that will outline each set of games for the week. And to be honest, there's been so many changes with the schedule here because of all the impacts from COVID. But so we try to make sure this is up to date, and I think I did update this on Tuesday. So essentially, it'll show out the slate of games here, and it'll be in chronological order. There are a time and weather impact there, and you can see for the weather if it says fair, this is the predicted weather for the time of the game. Then the impact will show none. Right? If you have good conditions, there won't be any real impacts from weather. But if you do see certain criteria met in the wind or precipitation, that's where essentially you can see things like a caution, where essentially winds might be, and precipitation might be like this marginal type of event where there's probably going to be some weather, but it doesn't look like it's going to really be a stunter or a significant impact on all the players in the game. But if you do see some criteria, let's say you have winds 20 miles per hour with heavy rain for the duration of the game, that's where you would see an extreme impact. And this table would update that this updates probably twice a day. So this is a way to kind of come back to the site and look at it.
And this kind of gives us a bird's eye view as to what to expect. So what we do is we use this as kind of a template, and then we'll expand on this during our podcast, and we'll let people know what players we're interested in, because we do have historical stats for specific players and also by position in general. And we can elaborate on, okay, we have, forecast at 18, 25 mile an hour winds, whatever it may be. Well, this player in windy conditions, this is how they perform statistically. So we kind of update them on the expectations based on the weather. We are in the process of updating this, hopefully over the next several weeks. Again, our buddy Nick Giraldi is going to actually customize this by position and also possibly by players. So the ultimate thing is people want to know, how is my fantasy team going to be impacted? That's bottom line, right? So we're going to have fantasy point differentials based on those weather conditions that we're going to be adding to this table hopefully soon here.
And Sean, you were talking a little bit earlier. You guys actually are doing a lot of analytics and numbers, and you're talking about specific players who may see the effects. You're talking about Roethlisberger throwing 4 INTs in a snowstorm, or it could be Denver. It's an extremely windy day, so Drew Lock, the wind may affect his performance. So how do you guys talk to us a little bit about that? How you're breaking down how it's affecting individual players?
Yeah, I can lead on this one. So we have basically archived data that we're able to use that breaks it down basically almost every play for every game going back to 2009. So what we're able to do is look at those fantasy stats. So we have fantasy point projections for half-point PPR, full-point PPR, standard leagues, and we're able to look at how that player has performed statistically during those weather-like events. So, hey, how has this quarterback performed in 20 to 30 mile an hour winds? Okay, well, we see a decrease in fantasy points by 4, and they throw their TD or their touchdown interception ratio has changed X, Y, and Z amount. And then we also kind of have another stats package that we'll use based on weather conditions as well. So what we try to do is say, all right, our forecast is this for the weather. Let's look at the specific players and the positional players that we're interested in for that game and see if there's actually going to be an impact. Because quite frankly, for some players like an Aaron Rodgers, maybe we don't see as much of an impact for them, so we're not going to be as concerned about that player. For other players like a Jared Goff or something like that, or Kirk Cousins, for example, who played in Seattle this week during rainy games, there's an impact there we've seen statistically. So we really got to kind of decipher. We just, we kind of do this by position, but even a little bit more specifically by player when appropriate.
That's really awesome. You guys have been doing this. Obviously, you started the website last year. When we're recording this, it's October 14th. So we're about week 5, I think, into the season, maybe week 6. I can't remember with COVID and all that stuff going on. But talk about how the fans, how have you guys, the outreach? I mean, have you got a lot of positive responses from fantasy footballers? How's that went?
So I think our biggest interaction with folks right now is on our Twitter handle at FF Weather Guys, where it typically the interaction is most prevalent.
We'll return to Best of the Carolina Weather Group in a moment. Now your Carolina weather forecast. Here are today's forecast high temperatures for North Carolina. Here are the forecast lows for tonight for North Carolina. Here are tomorrow's forecast high temperatures. And here's forecast rainfall across North Carolina tomorrow. Here are the forecast highs for the day after tomorrow. And here's the forecast rainfall across North Carolina for the day after tomorrow. This is the total rainfall forecast across North Carolina for the next 3 days. Here's the severe thunderstorm outlook for today from the Storm Prediction Center. Here are the forecast high temperatures for today for South Carolina. Here are the low temperatures for today for South Carolina. Here's the probability of precipitation forecast across South Carolina today. And here are the rain chances across South Carolina tonight. Here are tomorrow's forecast highs across South Carolina. Here are the forecast low temperatures for tomorrow for South Carolina. And here is the probability of precipitation across South Carolina tomorrow. Here's the precipitation chances across South Carolina tomorrow night. Here are the forecast highs for the day after tomorrow in South Carolina. Here are the forecast low temperatures across South Carolina for the day after tomorrow. And here are the rain chances across South Carolina for the day after tomorrow. And South Carolina's probability of precipitation for that night. Here's the Storm Prediction Center's severe thunderstorm outlook across South Carolina for today through tonight. Here's the Storm Prediction Center's severe thunderstorm outlook across South Carolina for tomorrow and tomorrow night. And here's the Storm Prediction Center's severe thunderstorm outlook across South Carolina for the day after tomorrow through that night. Here's the severe thunderstorm outlook for today from the Storm Prediction Center. And now here's a live look at weather radar across the southeast.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Mandy Cohen, Secretary of the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services. And when you follow the 3 W's, you protect your family and your neighbors from COVID-19. When you leave your home, practice your W's. Wear a cloth face covering, wait 6 feet apart, wash your hands often. Wear, wait, wash. We're in this together. Stay strong, North Carolina.
Fight the spread and take a stand against coronavirus. Wear a mask in public. Stay at least 6 feet apart from others. And get tested. Join us and fight the spread. Visit scdhec.gov/COVID-19.
Getting tested for COVID-19 helps you to take the steps needed to protect yourself, your loved ones, and your community. Find the testing location at scdhec.gov/COVID-19 testing.
Deciding when to wear a mask isn't about who you know or how well you know them. Just ask yourself, will I be with anyone I don't live with? If the answer is yes, get behind the mask. Help slow the spread of COVID-19. Get behind the mask. Learn more at covid19.ncdhhs.gov.
You'll see your Carolina weather forecast at 25 and 55 past. And now back to the best of the Carolina Weather Group on the all-new Carolina Weather Net.
Is predicted weather, and the folks are aware of those impacts. Usually when you see like some of the mainstream media or sports channels talking about weather impacts, and usually I guess that as you get up into later in the season, as we know, winter storms or late fall storms can get more energy from the jet streams. That's where we typically see those larger weather impacts, and I think that's where the draws start to come in, especially when people are fighting for those playoff positions, right? They want to make sure that they don't make a mistake, and people start to get really meticulous with their lineups. And we're speaking more specifically on like these redraft leagues, essentially where you have like a draft at the beginning of the season, and you have your team throughout the year. So that's where we've seen the most interaction with regards to our fan base.
Yeah, and during those weeks, I mean, we'll broadcast on our Twitter feed like, "Hey guys, this is what we're forecasting. Here's are the impacts," and people will reach out to us. They're like, "Hey, I'm deciding between playing this player and that player. What do you think?" And we'll say, "Hey, based on what we've seen in these weather conditions, this player has a discrepancy of this. We would side with this guy." And so we've seen this for a variety of weather events. Most people think of the big rain or snowstorms. This also applies for high impact wind events as well. We had 1 week last year that we had 4 big wind events, whereas 25, 35 mile an hour winds, we saw considerable impacts.
Yeah. One of those games was the Kansas City Chiefs, and people who were starting Tyreek Hill and Patrick Mahomes, they were really intent on getting some of those deep bombs that just never happened. They didn't get any passes over 20 yards.
Yeah,
you literally see these coaches' plans. They change their game plans essentially based off of some of these weather conditions.
Yeah, when it's bad enough. And even more recently, like Mike and I used this information. We were expecting rain for the Washington game, for the Washington football team. And so we actually steered away from Terry McLaurin, and he only had 3 catches for 26 yards, I believe, on Sunday. So, which I mean, it wasn't wet for the entire game, but enough where it played an impact. So, yeah.
You mentioned mainstream media. You don't have to drop any names, but have you found maybe a few of those folks sliding into the DM saying, "Hey, what's the weather going to be like?" Everybody's always asking for fantasy football advice. Who should I start? Who should I sit? Have you ever had any messages from folks maybe on the TV that's asked for your opinion?
So I don't think we've had any essentially any folks reach out for start-sit decisions regarding that, but we have some interaction with some of the folks from Fantasy Pros and the Fantasy Footballers, and I think there was a couple of folks from Yahoo. It's Yahoo that are all involved in the industry that will kind of interact time to time with us on Twitter. I think last year, one of the guys from the Fantasy Footballers, Jason Moore.
Jason Moore, yep.
Yeah, he reached out, and it was literally a question about weather, and he's just like, "Is there any weather experts out there that would understand to know what the actual forecast is here?" Because it was during that time of year where it was really high impactful for the people watching for this particular game. And he did reach out to just put a general question. A lot of our fans CC'd him or tweeted at him with our handle, so we can kind of go in there and provide some information.
Hey guys, we touched on this a little bit with talking about individual position players and the impacts on them. I was wondering a little bit about the kicking and punting game. I mean, that seems to be an area of the game that could really be influenced by wind in particular, but also precipitation as well. What sense do you guys make of how important weather is on that aspect of the football game?
Yeah, that absolutely is. And a lot of this comes down, another message that we speak to is it really matters based on the stadium as well, how the winds are swirling around that stadium, how they're funneled in, and also the field type as well. Is this an AstroTurf? Is this a grass field? So those are all things that play in to how well a kicker can perform in weather conditions. We're in the works right now of gathering kicker data. So I don't want to say anything quantitatively as far as like from a statistical analysis standpoint, but observationally, we usually talk about games after we see them after the week, and we'll talk about kickers, and we definitely notice that higher winds going cross field or going against the kicker definitely have an impact for sure.
So guys, on any given Sunday, we can have a very diverse slate of weather across the U.S. Are there any particular locations across, anywhere that you guys forecast for that you find particularly challenging or frequently come up as a caution flag?
The most challenging weather for us is convection. It's a really anything in the Florida area, typically in the southeastern United States. This is something that we struggle with early season, late summer into early fall when convection's still blooming. And the high res models will pick up on this stuff. And, we're out 72 hours out. We're like, all right, it's looking like it's going to happen. And we literally have to update people like hourly on Sunday to be like, all right, guys, this is the recent model run. This is what we're expecting. Because, those are mesoscale features that are incredibly hard to predict for a 3 to 4 hour window of time during a ball game. But at the same time, those could be incredibly impactful because you got heavy rains and a lot of wind typically associated with those as well. So I would say those are the ones that we struggle with the most when there's any type of convection.
Yeah, those are the events that typically trip our algorithms in our fancy impact table and some of our maps. If you look at those circles and when we change different colors, you'll see certain model runs show the impacts, and then all of a sudden they take them away because the models are having a hard time resolving the convective features. And sometimes they can sneak under the radar. I remember there was a game last year in Jacksonville where we had this strong northeasterly flow off the ocean that was just bringing these shallow convective cells across the stadium. And it was just like the popcorn variety, and it was just causing. You'd hear we didn't talk about it much in the podcast that week because we the models didn't see it, and then all of a sudden they'd be raining on and off during the game, and Sean was sending us messages. Do you see this rain? It's going. It's the announcers are talking about it. We missed this. I'm like, oh my god, the joys of forecasting Florida weather.
I can only imagine your models. Is it like a blended run? Is it like a high resolution, like her 3 kilometer going into the NAM 3 and 12, into the GFS out to the 7-day? Do you layer it in that manner? That way you get the higher resolution or the RAP in the first couple of days?
So this is something that we're still working on. And right now, as we were kind of spinning up things here, we've been relying mainly on GFS data at first, but we are shifting over to leverage the National Weather blend of models from the National Weather Service. So we are going to be shifting over to that because obviously those are the guys that are paying attention more to each location and try to be as skillful as possible. And then we can take that information and convert it into the impact, or how that impacts the specific players. So it takes some of the burden off of us in the forecasting world and allows us to focus on that impact piece.
And then we can also elaborate on that. Because we may use that from the National Weather Service, but obviously we have access to the different high resolution models. And again, that's something that we typically expand on during our podcast. And there may be some games that don't even come up as a caution on our table necessarily because they may not meet a certain threshold. But for us, just observationally, we know these are things that we need to monitor. So we'll mention them during our podcast or on Twitter.
You're talking about Southeast convection. I would also imagine maybe lake effect snow. Buffalo, Chicago, Cleveland, Green Bay, all locations that could see that, where one side of town could get 6 feet and the other side could get 2 inches,
Getting back to your social media outreach and your fans, the football fans in general, and how you integrate, how you kind of mesh with everything. How do your fans respond to your products, right? Because it looks like you do everything kind of for free. You're sort of providing that kind of service. And do you find that a lot of fans are really into what you do and share it out, and you get a lot of good response and positive feedback out of it? Or how does all that work? How do you get your how do you know how you're doing overall?
Yeah, no, we always appreciate the feedback. We'll have some people that'll reach out like, oh, I really wish I knew this, or I really wish you approached it this way or offered this kind of information. And again, that's kind of how we're working in developing our webpage and our user interface. So most people have been really constructive and just really helpful and really nice, which is not always the case in the weather world, as we know. Mm-hmm. But yeah, no, it's been a really good experience. We used to even do a photo contest where people would, obviously not the case now, at least for most stadiums, but if you were at a game where there was weather, take a picture for us and, we'll put it on our website or show it during our podcast. And people seem to appreciate that as well.
Yeah, on our website, we do have something called a mailbag where some folks can come in and write us a question, and we can essentially take that feedback and discuss it and respond back. So that's something that's also an option on the website.
Yeah, I think it's this right here. So you can put your message in and submit. And then there was also what you talked about, which is weekly weather blog, then the photo contest. So it's like, you give folks an incentive to sort of be more of a part of the website, which I think is great because you're allowing them to interact with you in your domain, which is awesome. So
well, talking about the product, we'll start to wrap up here. How can we find you? What's the social media platform of choice? I don't know if you guys do Facebook. I know you do Twitter, but tell us about social media. I know you guys do podcasts, blogs. I even think you might be dabbling into doing some live game updates. Am I correct with that?
Yes. Yeah. So we've been moving onto the Twitch platform. So if you twitch.tv/FF Weather Guys, that's essentially we have our show usually on Thursday or Fridays. We try to do it around 8 p.m. And then when there are high impact weather events on a Sunday, we'll get up on Twitch again and have a Sunday show usually around 11 a.m. That's one source where we've been kind of more interactive with folks.
Well, guys, thank you for your time. We appreciate it. Thank you guys for watching the Carolina Weather Group. Make sure if you're a fantasy football player, go check out these guys. Fantasy Football Weather Guys. Google them. You can find the Twitter account, website, all of that good info. And make sure that you tune into the blog and the podcast, as well as the live broadcast there on Twitch on Sunday morning. So until then, we hope you have a great week, and we'll see you next time here on the Carolina Weather.
Good evening from Charlotte. It is June the 17th, 2020. I'm James Brierton. Did you get a chance to see the sun today at all? Maybe kind of sort of. We have been cut off from the rest of the world. No, I'm not talking coronavirus. I'm talking about this low pressure that has just parked over the Carolinas today. It's very pretty on this satellite image that our friend Brad Panovich captured. You can see it there just spinning out over like Fayetteville, Fort Bragg, between Charlotte and Raleigh. Just spinning and spinning and spinning, but that just socked us in with clouds. I did see just a little bit of sun today here in Charlotte before the sun went down, and that was a nice change of pace after a couple days of cloudy and cold weather. All right, this week we are talking the PGA Tour, which has resumed and is in Hilton Head, South Carolina for the RBC Heritage. Kicks off tomorrow after a couple of practice rounds. I'm holding here the weather forecast from their on-site meteorologist, Stewart Williams. This is what we call a tease. I'll have this for you coming up. What we're going to get to first is a piece of tape that has been very patiently waiting in the wings. So Stewart sat down with the Carolina Weather Group in February to record an interview that at the time we thought was going to air alongside the Wells Fargo Championship here in Charlotte. Well, as you now know, that never happened, and other PGA Tour events were canceled. They are now resuming operations without fans and will be playing in Hilton Head, South Carolina. So we are very excited to be able to bring this piece of tape to you. This is a premiere of a new episode. You've never seen this interview before, despite the fact that it was recorded in February, but I felt that I needed to explain to you that it was recorded in a time where I could still get a haircut, and where the picture of snow over Scotty Powell's shoulder made sense, and all the references to fans attending the event also made sense back just a few months ago. So without further ado, we'll get on over to this, and then coming up later on in the program, about 30 minutes from now, we'll get a check of your weather headlines this week, including that PGA Tour forecast, an update on Sharpie Gate, and we'll take a look at the tropics as well, too. But without further ado, here is our interview with Stewart Williams, the on-site meteorologist for the PGA Tour, and he'll tell us a little bit about the company he works for as well.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Carolina Weather Group. We're happy to have you this evening. And we present Mr. Stewart Williams, meteorologist for the PGA Tour, which is a really cool job that I would love to have. As a big golf fan, I think it's a really unique job that Stewart has, and he's going to talk to us a little bit about that tonight and let us know what all his duties are as he travels across the PGA Tour. And we'd love for you to interact with us tonight. So if you have any questions or comments, feel free to drop them on the social media platforms, and we'll address those. And we'll let Stewart give out some of his social media information towards the end of the interview tonight. That way, if you want to follow him on Twitter, you can do that, or just get more information. So we appreciate having Stewart with us tonight. Stewart, welcome back to the show. I know we had you on a couple of years ago, fellow North Carolinian, and it's great to have you with us tonight. Glad to see that you're actually home and not out on the road right now. So for those who may be introduced to you for the first time, tell us a little bit about you. I know you live here in North Carolina. You went to school here in North Carolina, so kind of give us a brief background about who you are.
Yeah, I grew up in Winston-Salem. I currently live in High Point, North Carolina, and I got my meteorology degree from UNC Asheville, so I was actually there from 1988 to 92, so that kind of dates myself there. So 50 years old now, so I'm getting older. But after that, I started working for a company called Mobile Weather, and we started doing golf tournaments, weather for golf tournaments. So it started like with the Crosby Celebrity Tournament there in Winston, and the Vantage Championship, which was a Champions Tour event in Winston. And after that, I was interning then at that time when we started those, probably about 91 or so. And then as I graduated, we kind of formed a company called Mobile Weather, and we started doing more and more golf tournaments. So individual tournaments would hire us. And then from there in 1995, we signed a full-time contract with the PGA Tour doing all their events. So, and it just kept snowballing from there. And then so I was working with a company then called Mobile Weather. And so we were doing golf tournaments. I was traveling all over the country. And then in 2005, I started working for DTN. And ever since then, I've been with DTN, and we just keep growing and doing more and more events. So, we have all the PGA Tour, Champions Tour, Korn Ferry Tour. We do the LPGA. We do the PGA of America, which includes the PGA Championship, Ryder Cup, Senior PGA, and some of their smaller events. And we do quite a few international events for IMG. We do a lot of Asian tournaments in China and Taiwan and that kind of thing. So, we do over 150 events a year now, so it's quite busy.
Well, sort of. I know you're not the only one. I mean, that's a lot of traveling. So,
yeah.
Tell us a little bit about your team. How many meteorologists do you guys have? Is it just you that goes out to a tournament, or is there kind of a team aspect for you guys?
Yeah.
How's that going?
Yeah, we've got we've got 7 or 8 guys that travel all the time, and we usually just send one person to each tournament or event that we cover, because we also do outdoor concerts, and we do some other events like that we have a meteorologist go to and that help out. But there's one guy per tournament, and so basically, on the PGA Tour or any golf tournament or any outdoor event that we do, lightning is the number one concern. So that's why a meteorologist is on site. We set up an electric field mill. We have 2 laptop computers that have, obviously, the Doppler radar, lightning detection. We have a mix of VISLA's National Lightning Detection Network, and and so all that data that we get in-house, we have all the computer models that we look at, the NAM, the Euro, the GFS, all those. So everything's in-house, and we sector where we're going to go, and we can make custom products for ourselves and that kind of thing. So we make our own forecast on site. So using all that technology, as an official comes in wondering what the weather is, if we do see a threat, we see a storm developing, the officials can come in, we can show them exactly on the screen what is happening, and based on what we're showing them and what our opinions are of what's going to happen, then the officials can make very good decisions of, okay, when do we need to stop? And then once we do that, as especially on the PGA Tour. They have LED boards across the golf course. They'll put weather warning signs up. The officials will blow horns to the players, signaling that it's a dangerous situation. So then the players will get moved off to evacuation vans and cars and that kind of thing, and they're brought to the clubhouse. And so hopefully, if we do our job correctly, then we've given enough time to where people can get back to the buses and hopefully back to their cars, because not everybody has a clubhouse pass. So they can't all get indoors to safety, so we got to get a lot of them back to their cars. So it's a big machine. It's a big operation, but it's most tournaments, I'd say every tournament has an evacuation plan, emergency plan. So it works pretty well. And then the big question is, once we have stopped play, when do we go back and start playing? When is it safe to go back out? So that's when we help big time as far as, okay, we think this storm is going to be out of here at such and such time. And then they can open up the practice facilities again, let the players warm back up, and then we'll get them back out to the golf course and start playing again.
Stewart, that kind of rings a bell here in Charleston at Bulls Bay, the tournament last year. LPGA, lightning hit a tree. Someone was went under the tree, and it's a serious situation with these thunderstorms and in these golf tournaments. How much collaboration do you guys have with the local National Weather Service, especially in big events like this?
In the last few years, there's been a little bit more collaboration because, with Homeland Security and a lot of these big, government agencies and everything, a lot of these agencies are using golf tournaments as their training grounds for big events and things like that. So I know down at the RBC Heritage down in Hilton Head, the FBI shows up and all the government agencies, the Weather Service, and so they do a lot of practice at these at that event, since it's such a large event. And so I do coordinate with the Weather Service there. We'll talk what we're thinking, and kind of bounce off ideas off each other. But for the most part, I'll maybe read a forecast discussion or something like that from the Weather Service. But like I said, having everything in house, all of our own computer models and that kind of thing, we basically do our own thing. To be honest with you, make our own forecast. Because I think in a lot of ways, sometimes we do a better job because we know what golf wants and we know what golf needs. So we know what they're looking for as far as a forecast goes. Whereas the Weather Service, they may be a little more general because they have a bigger area to cover. So for example, for us, wind forecasts are very big at the golf tournaments because that plays a huge role on how the golf course is going to be set up each day. So we concentrate a lot on wind, and so we try to be very accurate in that department, where you may see a weather forecast from the Weather Service that says winds are 5 to 10. Well, okay, that's kind of general. We try to be more exact than that, where our forecast will say maybe we have a westerly wind, like on the coast there. Maybe you have a drainage wind in the morning off the land, and then we'll get the sea breeze at 1 o'clock, and it's going to shift out of the south or southeast or whatever, and it's going to be 10 to 15 at that point. A lot of times the Weather Service really doesn't break it down like that. So, we try to be more specific of what's going to happen at the golf course so they can plan how they're going to set the golf course up. So that's some of the things that I think we do a better job at than TV or Weather Service being more general.
Stewart, let's play. Let's hope we're not forecasting too far in the future. We have a Wells Fargo Championship coming up in Charlotte, the Wyndham Championship in Greensboro. Let's say that you're there forecasting and you see it could be a potential stormy day. That there's going to be thunderstorms moving into the air. What is it? Kind of give us what you do the morning of. Kind of give us a play-by-play of what that setup looks like if you see, it's going to be a stormy afternoon or something in these tournaments.
Well, let's say the first tee time is 7 a.m., okay? That's usually when most tournaments start, 7 in the morning. And I'm usually there probably about 5:30 in the morning because I'm looking at weather data, looking at the latest stuff, making my forecasts and getting that out and distributed, uploaded to the player page, that kind of thing. And so we also have radios that we communicate to the officials with. So every morning I'll go into the rules office and tell the guys as they head out to set the golf course up what I think the winds are going to be that day, and then what time I think the best chances of us getting a thunderstorm. And so if you take a North Carolina tournament, typically what happens is, as you'll know, Scotty, and they'll start in the mountains. They'll bubble up in the mountains about midday, early afternoon, and then as they get going, they'll roll off into the Piedmont, and then they'll usually make it to Greensboro or Charlotte by 3, 4, 5 in the afternoon, depending on how fast they move and what the scenario is. So, so I'll tell the officials that morning, hey, I think we're going to see storms probably anywhere from that 3 to 7 range. And then that'll give them an idea when they need to start paying attention, so to speak. So
we'll return to Best of the Carolina Weather Group in a moment. Now your Carolina weather forecast. Here are today's forecast high temperatures for North Carolina. Here are the forecast lows for tonight for North Carolina. Here are tomorrow's forecast high temperatures. And here's forecast rainfall across North Carolina tomorrow. Here are the forecast highs for the day after tomorrow. And here's the forecast rainfall across North Carolina for the day after tomorrow. This is the total rainfall forecast across North Carolina for the next 3 days. Here's the severe thunderstorm outlook for today from the Storm Prediction Center. Here are the forecast high temperatures for today for South Carolina. Here are the low temperatures for today for South Carolina. Here's the probability of precipitation forecast across South Carolina today. And here are the rain chances across South Carolina tonight. Here are tomorrow's forecast highs across South Carolina. Here are the forecast low temperatures for tomorrow for South Carolina. And here is the probability of precipitation across South Carolina tomorrow. Here's the precipitation chances across South Carolina tomorrow night. Here are the forecast highs for the day after tomorrow in South Carolina. Here are the forecast low temperatures across South Carolina for the day after tomorrow. And here are the rain chances across South Carolina for the day after tomorrow. And South Carolina's probability of precipitation for that night. Here's the Storm Prediction Center's severe thunderstorm outlook across South Carolina for today through tonight. Here's the Storm Prediction Center's severe thunderstorm outlook across South Carolina for tomorrow and tomorrow night. And here's the Storm Prediction Center's severe thunderstorm outlook across South Carolina for the day after tomorrow through that night. Here's the severe thunderstorm outlook for today from the Storm Prediction Center. And now here's a live look at weather radar across the southeast.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Mandy Cohen, Secretary of the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services. And when you follow the 3 W's, you protect your family and your neighbors from COVID-19. When you leave your home, practice your W's. Wear a cloth face covering, wait 6 feet apart, wash your hands often. Wear, wait, wash. We're in this together. Stay strong, North Carolina.
Fight the spread and take a stand against coronavirus. Wear a mask in public. Stay at least 6 feet apart from others. And get tested. Join us and fight the spread. Visit scdhec.gov/COVID-19.
tested for COVID-19 helps you to take the steps needed to protect yourself, your loved ones, and your community. Find the testing location at scdhec.gov/COVID-19 testing.
Deciding when to wear a mask isn't about who you know or how well you know them. Just ask yourself, will I be with anyone I don't live with? If the answer is yes, get behind the mask. Help slow the spread of COVID-19. Get behind the mask. Learn more at covid19.ncdhhs.gov.
You'll see your Carolina weather forecast at 25 and 55 past. And now back to the best of the Carolina Weather Group on the all-new Carolina Weather Net.
I'll keep looking at the new data, see if there's anything we need to update. And then obviously I keep watching the screens. I'll have the radars going and that kind of thing. And then as soon as I see something that has a potential of getting to us, that's when I'll get on the radio and tell the officials, hey, I'm seeing some thunderstorms over, let's say, Yadkinville, and they're going to be moving across Winston and the Greensboro here in the next hour, hour and a half. So that'll give them the heads up that, hey, I'm starting to see some stuff that could impact us here in the next hour or two. And so that's when we'll start putting on the LED boards. There's a weather policy that runs and things that say, hey, inclement weather is possible, please pay attention, that kind of thing. And then as the storm keeps moving closer, then I keep updating the officials. And then when I think is within, less than an hour, usually the head rules official, which would be Mark Russell or Slugger White, who are in charge of the competition, basically. They'll come into my office. I show them exactly what's happening. And then we try to give at least 30 minutes notice before the storm's going to hit the golf course so that we can blow the horns and give enough time for people to start trickling out and get the players in. And then obviously, as the storm gets closer, hopefully we've gotten everybody off the golf course, and then the storm will hit. And then, like I said, then we have the conversations. When you think it's going to be out of here? When is it safe to resume? And so they'll already start making the plans on when that gets out of there, when we're going to let them to go back out and warm up on the range and then get them back out on the golf course. So, it's kind of a lengthy process, but as with weather, you guys, we have thunderstorms that can pop up right on top of you. So that's why we also have an electric field mill that we set up on site that measures the electrical charge. And so if we're seeing something develop real close to us, hasn't produced lightning yet, and we're wondering, is it going to, that electric field mill gives us the heads up that, hey, charges are building. And also looking on the radar, you look at the cloud tops. You kind of know what those cloud tops keep growing, and you know what the freezing level is. And when it gets a certain height above that freezing level, that's when you start seeing the lightning. So using all those things together, using all those things together, we can get a good idea that, hey, this cell will probably going to produce lightning. So that electric field mill is crucial in that aspect. So it may give us 10 or 15 minutes that we wouldn't have had if you waited for the first lightning bolt to come out. So, we may only have 10 or 15 minutes to get them off, but that's still better than having no warning and all of a sudden there's a lightning bolt. So, yeah, technology plays a huge role in what we do.
That's pretty fascinating. I didn't realize that much went into it. That's pretty sophisticated and really good coverage on your part.
Stewart, once y'all blow the horns, this is kind of going back a few minutes, but once y'all blow the horn to warn there's a tornado or tornado warning storm or even a severe thunderstorm on its way, the players, they're coming off the course, but for bystanders that are sitting alongside the course or even in the stands, is there a safe place for them to go?
Unless you have a clubhouse pass, and generally no. So, if you're having a severe weather event, obviously you don't want to keep them in the tents and the skyboxes because those are temporary structures and big lightning rods as well, just, with the poles and everything. So, we try to get people to go back to their cars, go back to the buses, get back to their cars. But, it doesn't always happen that way. There's always stragglers. There's people that try to hide and wait it out. And because as soon as we start back play, then they can run out and get a good spot on 18 or whatever, and they're in a good spot to get a good position to watch golf again. But it happens. We put weather warning signs up. We do the best we can. The PGA Tour, and all these events try to do the best they can to get people to leave. But there's always a few stragglers that always try to stand under a tree, and it's not recommended, but it definitely it happens.
No, I was just going to say that I'm sure that's a problem at a lot of these outdoor sporting events, whether it be air shows, I would imagine, have a big problem with that, or even like you mentioned earlier, concerts. I think it was just last year we saw some video went viral of a concert tent just taking off, and downdraft, outflow wind of a tornado, thunderstorm. There's my brain. So yeah, that seems like a real problem.
Yeah, it is, and there's a lot of outdoor festivals and concerts and stuff that don't have a meteorologist, and the people in charge really don't know weather. So I think that's when you have more of the mistakes made, or decision making, not poor decision making, when those things happen. So, fortunately for us and my company I work for, DTN, we do a lot of consultation. We have a lot of customers that call in and get opinion from a meteorologist. So I think it's getting better and better as far as people hiring meteorologists, or at least weather companies, to help them out and make good decisions. And like for me, on the on-site business, actually have a meteorologist at your site is expensive. You got to pay for hotel rooms and airline tickets and ship equipment, and plus have the meteorologist there. So that's kind of a hard thing for some organizations to pay that kind of money to have somebody there. But once you have that meteorologist there that's on site, they see how it works and how it takes the pressure off them making these decisions. And it actually pays for itself, to be honest with you, to make good decisions. But, like I said, if you don't have the money, a lot of these organizations just don't have the budget for it. Hey, at least they can still hire a company like mine and have a consultation where they can call in, so it definitely makes a difference.
Definitely so. Able to do that for Speedway Motorsports Incorporated. It definitely, I tell them, I'll worry about the weather. You guys worry about running the event. And it's just, I think it's a peace of mind for those folks.
Well, I say it all the time myself is I'll tell you when you need to worry.
Yeah. I'll do the worrying for you.
Exactly. I'll tell you when you need to worry. So,
I want to get back to what you mentioned about winds, right? So we talked about wind size, right? And we get into the nitty gritty of it, right? So you're talking about sea breezes, you're talking about things at the coastline, even inland, where you can have wind shifting or building, stronger pressure gradient, higher winds from certain directions. Do you get into the science of saying, you look at the course, you look at the direction of wind, the dominant direction of wind for the day, and the speeds? Do you talk about which links are going to be more difficult than others? When you look at long-range trajectory shots or higher iron shots, do you speak about look for a lean to the left or hooking or anything like that when you get into the wind forecast?
Yeah, the rules officials, the guys that are setting up the golf course, they're the ones that's more concerned with which holes are going to play. Let's just say we have on hole number 1, we have a strong south wind and it's blowing, 15 to 20 miles per hour. Well, if it's blowing from behind them, then a lot of times what they'll do is they'll move the tee blocks back so that hole plays longer. And then on the next hole, maybe it's going the opposite direction. Now it's in the player's face when they tee off. So they may move those tee blocks up so it plays shorter. That way they're trying to keep everything moving, but they're also trying to make it not hard, but they're trying to make it fair too. Not necessarily hard, but fair, and keep things moving. So, crosswinds play a big role, especially near the greens, where if there's a lake or a big sand trap or something that's on the right side and it's blowing from left to right, well, they may put that hole location more towards the left side of the green, so guys aren't dumping in the lake the whole time trying to get it to the hole. That's So all those strategies play a role in how the golf course is set up. So definitely wind direction definitely is important. How strong the wind is.
So they're actually changing distances and layout.
Absolutely. So we have 18 holes. We have 18 holes, and all through that golf course, it's going to be in their face or behind them, left to right, right to left. So all those things play a role in how the golf course is set up. So definitely wind definitely is a major impact on golf tournaments. So
very interesting. Very neat. Scotty, go ahead.
Yeah, Stewart, in some circumstances, I know we saw the Masters had some severe weather roll through back in 2019. When we see these big severe weather events, you guys, I'm sure, coordinate with the course, with the tour, with the TV networks, and kind of make the best plans. Is that right?
Yeah, try to do what's right. You don't want to get anybody hurt. And if there's a high risk for severe weather, i.e. tornadoes or even, just strong straight line wind and storms, we may go early, 2 tees early on the weekend or a day on the weekend to avoid some of that severe weather that we think is going to happen in the afternoon. So, the tour is aware of that, and they'll try to make accommodations to maybe avoid some of that to keep people safe and get the round in. Because the tour has a policy that we'll play on Monday to complete 72 holes. 72 holes is a must. They want to get every round in. So so we will do that on Sundays a lot of time to try to get everything completed and so we don't have to go into Monday. But for the most part, if it's a 30-40% chance of a thunderstorm day, then they're not likely going to change anything. It's just we're going to play golf and hopefully, that scattered thunderstorm will stay away from us. But if we do get hit and we don't finish, well, we'll be back Monday morning. So that's how it works.
I know another element that is tricky for you guys, especially on the West Coast swing early in the season, is fog. Seeing lots of fog delays and even some cancellations of round because of visibility. Talk to us a little bit about forecasting fog.
Yeah, it's tough, man. That marine layer out there, and what most people don't realize in California, the Pacific Ocean out there gets the Aleutian Current, which is very cold. It's cold water, and so fog forms on it quite a bit. So when we get out there, a lot of the things that we look for is the offshore flow, and we love it when there's offshore flow because it pushes that marine layer way out in the ocean, and skies stay clear at the golf course. Well, the thing that I've learned forecasting the weather out there, as soon as that pressure gradient starts going neutral, that's usually when the marine layer fog will move in. And so I've seen it. We had it this year at Torrey Pines at the Farmers Insurance Open. One day the fog rolled in early in the morning, and it stuck around till about 9:30 in the morning. So we had to delay for a couple hours, and then the sun finally ate through it and broke it apart, and it pushed offshore. So, it's a tough thing because with fog, you just don't know how long it's going to stick around. How thick it's going to be. We get the marine layer out there too. Sometimes it lifts and it's just a cloud deck, and you're fine. It's just a cloudy day. But at Torrey Pines, we do have some elevation. I think we're up at 400 or 500 feet there, and so if it lifts up to 500 feet, we're in the cloud and we get socked in, and then obviously you go other places along the coast there that's not elevated, and it's fine. So it's definitely tough, but something we deal with, and we just try to help the best we can with that. So
I know we're getting late on the interview. Fun question here: any favorite PGA Tour stops, and any of the PGA Tour players really weather savvy that we might not know about?
Well, I mean, favorite weather stops. I mean, as far as any tournaments go, Hilton Head's a big favorite of mine. Any Hawaii tournament's great. Pebble Beach is awesome if the weather's good. Same thing with Torrey Pines in California. So yeah, we go to some great places. I mean, this past year, I went to Japan and South Korea. I went to Shanghai, China. And this year, later in the year, I'm going to Australia. So, yeah, I mean, we go to some great places, and it's a lot of fun. So, yeah, it's good.
I was going to say, you have to go to these areas and actually learn the weather in these areas. You probably would have to understand it before you even go.
Yeah, believe it or not, I mean, everywhere I go, I start paying attention to where I'm going a month or two ahead of time. So I know when I get there what's been happening. So you kind of got a feel for what's been going on. So, I've already been keeping tabs for the next couple of weeks when I go to Tucson and California again. And, and then obviously long term, you kind of looking, I've got Florida lurking in March. I'm going down to Florida. So you definitely keep up with what's going on and what's been happening. So, kind of what to expect going into it. So it's definitely harder in Japan and Korea and some of these places where, maybe the radar data is not as timely, or you don't have all the good data you have here in the U.S. You still have some data, but maybe not quite as good as some of the things you're used to using. So, and, forecasting wind and things like that gets a little more difficult, some of these spots. So, but still, us being there is still better than, for the tour and some of these tournaments, having us there is still better than not having us there, where they would just be guessing. So, we do the best we can, and they know it's not the U.S. and it's not quite as good, but it's still, we still send our electric field mill over there, and we still have that and the detection network and that kind of thing. So,
oh, wow, I bet that's interesting, transporting that equipment across seas to foreign country.
Yeah, the tour sends a lot of containers and things, so it goes on with a lot of the scoreboards and that kind of stuff. So it helps.
One more question from me is as far as golf and the weather. Talk about course saturation. We're talking about frost in the morning, dew on the grass, dew points, humidity, right? How does it factor in your forecast for when the starting time is? Does that sometimes get pumped up because of the ground's just wet and needs time to dry out, or?
Well, obviously, if it's totally saturated, there's the rules of golf dictate what we can do as far as playing golf on a saturated golf course. So if there's still some standing water or some real wet areas, the tour a lot of time will institute a policy of lift, clean, in place, where they can get relief maybe from some of those spots to a drier area that's not any closer to the hole, but they get some relief. And then they can pick up mud on their ball, so they can pick the ball up and wipe the mud off and place it back down and then hit it. So that helps us out quite a bit. But if we still have water running down the fairways, or there's puddles on the greens, and you can't put the ball through a puddle, so then obviously we can't play in those conditions. But golf courses are made to drain, so typically once the standing water is gone, then they institute that policy of maybe lift, clean, in place. That way we can still play and not be stopped under the rules of golf. So as far as frost goes, we do try to do frost forecasts. It does come into play a lot of times when we're in the desert of Arizona in February and March, because it can get really cold there in the mornings and then warm up pretty quickly for the mid to late mornings. So we try to help them out with frost forecasts. Obviously, you got to just wait for it to melt before you can get on there, because you don't want to kill the grass stepping on it. So usually frost delays are not that long. They're usually 30 minutes to an hour, and then we can get out there and play. As far as late in the year, a lot of places where we go is Florida and the Southeast and that kind of thing. So typically we don't deal with frost too much in the fall, but definitely early in the year.
Well, Stewart, thank you so much for joining us. We certainly appreciate it, and glad that we could catch you while you're here at home. And we wish you the best of luck as you travel out to all these cool destinations, and hopefully you'll have some good weather. If folks want to follow along, do you have a social media account or something you'd like to promote?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter. It's at PGAWXMAN and the number one. So it's PGAWXMan1 on Twitter. And I'm on Facebook, just Stewart Williams. You'll just have to find me on that. But that's the only two social medias that I'm on. Yeah, Twitter, definitely follow me. And you can see what the forecasts are, what's going on at these tournaments that we're doing and these other events. So.
And the weather's bad, and you're at that tournament, just go find Stewart. You can blame him for it.
Yeah, that's right.
Stewart, thank you so much for joining us tonight. As always, we appreciate your time, and glad to catch up with you, and I hope to talk to you soon.
Absolutely. Scotty, thank you guys for having me on. I appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun, and hopefully we can do it more often.
Yes, sir. All right, guys, thanks for watching the Carolina Weather Group. We'll see you back for another episode next week.
All right, and that is our interview with Stewart Williams, DTN meteorologist, who goes to all the PGA Tour events and provides them on-location weather support. That interview, again, was recorded in February for what we thought was going to coincide with a premiere for the Wells Fargo Championship in Charlotte. This week, the PGA Tour is back in action. They are at the RBC Heritage event in Hilton Head, South Carolina. From Charlotte, I am James Brierton. We will see you back here next week. We will leave you, I'm trying to pull up a camera in Hilton Head, South Carolina to take a look at conditions there right now. It's not coming up. Go figure. But you'll have to trust us that Stewart's forecast says it won't be all too shabby. And here it is, a look from the Salty Dog there in Hilton Head, South Carolina. Again, I'm James Brierton, Charlotte. Thanks for joining us. Have a good night.
Welcome to the Carolina Weather Group. We're happy to have you this evening. Tonight, we have on meteorologist Jim Gandy. If you've been a follower of our show, you've probably seen Jim appear on the show a few times during these bigger weather events with hurricanes and winter storms. So Jim is joining us tonight from Columbia, South Carolina, and we're happy to have him. He was at WLTX there in Columbia, but has since retired. He retired, in fact, last year. Actually, Jim, I think we're coming up on the 1-year mark. Is that correct?
Just passed it. It was June 1st of last year.
Yeah, so we've just passed that. So I know retirement life, we were talking a little bit before we started recording here, has been good to you. So we'll talk a little bit more about that afterwards. But 45 years in the business, you're known as South Carolina's weatherman. Tell us how it started. How did your love for weather transition you into being a meteorologist on TV?
Nothing happened the way it was supposed to. My introduction to weather, ironically, was something that just scared me to death. I was probably maybe 4 years old. My dad was going to take me across the street to our house, and all of a sudden, the sky right before me just lit up with lightning. And it scared the living daylights out of me, as you can imagine. And from that time on, I was scared to death of lightning. Now, this was in Memphis. Then he got transferred to Jacksonville, Florida. And if you know anything about the weather in Florida, thunderstorms are pretty frequent. And so I got really interested in weather living in Florida, still scared to death of lightning. Really didn't control my fear until I went to college. I got my degree at Florida State. It was during that time that I kind of conquered my fear of lightning. Not that I don't have a healthy respect for it, I do. And then I went to Florida State, trained as a research meteorologist, and got out, graduated at absolutely the wrong time. It was 1974. We went straight into a recession. The government froze all hiring. The private sector wasn't what it was today. And
So I was forced to kind of look around. My first job as a meteorologist actually was at the Institute of Storm Research in Houston, Texas. But then their contracts dried up. Again, I'm without a job. So I went back to Memphis, and I actually went back to graduate school. In that first semester in graduate school, one of the TV stations in Memphis called me and asked me if I wanted to come down and audition. I had never been to a TV station, didn't know anything about television other than what I saw on TV. I went down there, did the audition. Whatever they saw, they liked, they hired me, and the rest is history.
Starting out in Memphis, I think your next move was to Oklahoma City.
Oklahoma City. I was in Memphis for 2 years. We were in the midst of a union fight there. The station was being unionized, and I hadn't had a pay raise in 2 years. So I decided, okay, maybe it's time to look elsewhere. And I applied to a number of TV stations in Florida, since my background was in tropical meteorology. And one day I get a tape back from Florida, and I think it was...
We'll return to Best of the Carolina Weather Group in a moment. Now your Carolina weather forecast. Here are today's forecast high temperatures for North Carolina. Here are the forecast lows for tonight for North Carolina. Here are tomorrow's forecast high temperatures. And here's forecast rainfall across North Carolina tomorrow. Here are the forecast highs for the day after tomorrow. And here's the forecast rainfall across North Carolina for the day after tomorrow. This is the total rainfall forecast across North Carolina for the next 3 days. Here's the severe thunderstorm outlook for today from the Storm Prediction Center. Here are the forecast high temperatures for today for South Carolina. Here are the low temperatures for today for South Carolina. Here's the probability of precipitation forecast across South Carolina today. And here are the rain chances across South Carolina tonight. Here are tomorrow's forecast highs across South Carolina. Here are the forecast low temperatures for tomorrow for South Carolina. And here is the probability of precipitation across South Carolina tomorrow. Here's the precipitation chances across South Carolina tomorrow night. Here are the forecast highs for the day after tomorrow in South Carolina. Here are the forecast low temperatures across South Carolina for the day after tomorrow. And here are the rain chances across South Carolina for the day after tomorrow. And South Carolina's probability of precipitation for that night. Here's the Storm Prediction Center's severe thunderstorm outlook across South Carolina for today through tonight. Here's the Storm Prediction Center's severe thunderstorm outlook across South Carolina for tomorrow and tomorrow night. And here's the Storm Prediction Center's severe thunderstorm outlook across South Carolina for the day after tomorrow through that night. Here's the severe thunderstorm outlook for today from the Storm Prediction Center. And now here's a live look at weather radar across the southeast.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Mandy Cohen, Secretary of the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services. And when you follow the 3 W's, you protect your family and your neighbors from COVID-19. When you leave your home, practice your W's. Wear a cloth face covering, wait 6 feet apart, wash your hands often. Wear, wait, wash. We're in this together. Stay strong, North Carolina.
Fight the spread and take a stand against coronavirus. Wear a mask in public. Stay at least 6 feet apart from others. And get tested. Join us and fight the spread. Visit scdhec.gov/COVID-19.
Getting tested for COVID-19 helps you to take the steps needed to protect yourself, your loved ones, and your community. Find the testing location at scdhec.gov/COVID-19 testing.
Deciding when to wear a mask isn't about who you know or how well you know them. Just ask yourself, will I be with anyone I don't live with? If the answer is yes, get behind the mask. Help slow the spread of COVID-19. Get behind the mask. Learn more at covid19.ncdhhs.gov.
You'll see your Carolina weather forecast at 25 and 55 past. And now back to the best of the Carolina Weather Group on the all-new Carolina Weather Net.
I get the tape back. Obviously, it was rejected. One of the directors in the control room said, well, they've got an opening in Oklahoma City. Why don't you try for that? Well, I just got this tape back. I threw it in the mail and didn't think too much of it. But then I would say just a few days later, I got a phone call from Jim Williams at KTVY, now K4 in Oklahoma City. And they flew me out there, and I did an audition right there on their set. I beat out everybody that was looking for the job. And so I spent almost 5 years in Oklahoma City. Then I went and spent 2 years with Mike Smith up in Wichita at the Kansas State Network. And then I got the job at WIS in Columbia, South Carolina, and was there for about 14 and a half years. And then Gannett offered me a job, and I went and worked at corporate for a year, and then came to Columbia at their station, WLTX, and was there for 20 years.
Going tropical, studying at Florida State, like you said, experienced in tropical meteorology. Then going out to Oklahoma, where, now the Oklahoma City market seems to be one of the most sought after markets there is with severe weather coverage. It's turned into, something that everybody tunes into now. Was it like that back in the 80s? I know the helicopters now, we have all these storm chasers, but what was it like in the 80s in the Oklahoma City market?
It was fantastic, but you have to understand, I went to Florida State University. We didn't talk much about tornadoes. So when I went out to Oklahoma, I told my folks, I said, well, we're going to find out what kind of meteorologist I am, because Oklahoma City is a tough market. It has broken many people, and we'll see if I can hack it. Well, I went out there at just the perfect time. I got the job in July, which was right at the end of the severe storm season. So I really had about 8 months to prepare. And prepare I did, because down the road from Oklahoma City, of course, is the University of Oklahoma, the National Severe Storms Laboratory, all right there in Norman, Oklahoma. And some of my friends at Florida State were working at the Severe Storms Laboratory. So I knew the caliber of people that were down there. My biggest fear in Oklahoma City was going on the air and saying something that wasn't correct.
OKC to Wichita to Columbia. Is there anything in particular that drew you to the Midlands versus being out west? Very different.
Well, one was a job,
right.
But after having been in Oklahoma City and Wichita for 7 years, and keep in mind I grew up in the Southeast, so when I came back to Columbia to interview for the job, the first thing I noticed was trees. And I said, oh my God, there are trees here. And not these little scrubby things you see out in the plains. And so I said, boy, if they offer me the job, I'm going to take it. And sure enough, they offered me the job. I took it, and the rest is history. I have to laugh. People always ask me about my time out in Oklahoma City and Wichita, if I ever chased storms. Yes. In fact, that's how I got into photography, was by chasing storms. I tell people that I chased storms before it became fashionable. When I was chasing, it was a rare event to run across another chaser. But today, when I see how many people are on the road chasing out there today, I'm just blown away. I said, oh my God, there's a traffic jam. I'm surprised they don't have cops out there directing traffic.
I mean, you're exactly right. I mean, we see it now even on when folks activate their GPS and they go into their apps, right? And they spell out names of people across 2 or 3 states. It's pretty impressive. So yeah, lots of people.
A lot of people out there.
And the competition is pretty stiff. Every once in a while on Twitter, you'll hear some scuffling going on about who was first in line or who was supposed to be first. So it's kind of interesting.
Well, see, I never had that problem. There wasn't anybody. There wasn't anybody out there.
If you don't know what you're looking at in real time at the sky and what's going on in the environment, you can learn a lot from that outside of looking at radar and all these products and everything. So yeah, I mean, that's folks have access to that technology now, so they know how to kind of gain ahead. They can jump over to another state where something else is going on. So kind of.
Well, for me, it was fantastic because I could take what I was seeing in the field, and when I went back to the radar, now I could start to put things together. And I think that made me a better radar analyst because I could see what was on the radar and I could visualize because I had seen it in the field. Right. And so it was a big help.
Jim, I want to get back to Columbia. So overall in Columbia, you're talking about 30 years total.
34 years.
34 years. Let's talk about some of the major events, some of the major things you remember from Columbia. I was here during Hugo in '89. I experienced that as a teenager in high school. We left. We went to Union, South Carolina, and came back the next day, and it was just absolutely devastating. But I don't think folks knew what kind of impacts were going to occur inland, especially across the CSRA and all the way up into Charlotte and beyond. So tell us about your experience with Hugo.
Well, that was an interesting one because when I came to Columbia, what I had not had to do when I was out in the Plain States was make a 5-day forecast. When I came to Columbia, they insisted on a 5-day forecast. Well, this is 1989. Everybody's doing 5-day forecasts, but granted, they weren't that great. So I had been watching Hugo off the African coast, and I had been reading some of the analysis coming out of Washington. And going into the preceding weekend, they said the weather pattern is shaping up for this hurricane to affect the southeast, which caught my attention. So over the weekend, I'm following it pretty closely. And so I went into work early on that Monday, and I did my analysis. The one thing that struck me was that the computer models were having some trouble. They kept wanting to keep the storm going west. When it came off of Puerto Rico, though, it was moving northwest. But the models kept wanting to turn it west. I have a rule, and I developed this rule in Oklahoma. And that rule is, when it comes to computer models and reality, reality always wins. So I looked at the situation, trying to figure out why would the storm turn west. I could not find any reason for it to turn west. So I decided there isn't much out there to move this storm. So I pretty much interpolated from the 500 millibars right into South Carolina. So on Monday, that Monday night when I went on the air, I said, I think this is a hurricane that's going to hit us in South Carolina. And I was projecting mainly the low country. And the next day, I expected, that was it hit after midnight on Friday. So you're more than 3 days out. So I expected, okay, I'll have to change the forecast Tuesday, but we can make corrections along the way. Well, when I came in Tuesday, I was within 25 miles of the projected path. So I decided if things aren't changing, why change the forecast? So I stuck with the forecast, and it came right into Charleston, South Carolina, and it did quite a number on South Carolina. It was the strongest hurricane to hit South Carolina since the storm in 1893.
I want to touch on another major weather event topic, which was the October flood of 2015, which affected not only us at the coast, but again, the connection to Columbia and the tropics and an upper low. And it was just the perfect kind of combination. And so I know that there was dams that broke in Columbia. There was all kinds of flooding issues, you name it. So talk a little about your experience with that.
Well, that was an interesting one because if you'll remember, it was Joaquin that came into the Bahamas and went stationary and sat there for a while. And of course, we were all watching it. One of the things early that week that bothered me was that the projection for rainfall for this area seemed to be unreasonably high. Unreasonably high because every computer model had the hurricane passing well east of us, offshore, maybe going into North Carolina, but certainly that would still leave us on what is traditionally the dry side of the hurricane. So, you know, we're talking about this on the air, and of course I was talking with my colleagues there in the Weather Center, and I said, you know, something just does not add up. And so we kept looking, and I kept analyzing stuff and still couldn't figure it out. I knew that there was some information that we weren't getting. So the National Hurricane Center decided on that Wednesday night they would start flying the high altitude aircraft out toward the storm. And I said, and by the way, I was on conference calls with our corporate people. Tegna owned our TV station. So I was on the conference call and I said, look, we can make all kinds of projections we want, but the National Hurricane Center is going to fly that high altitude aircraft tonight. When that data gets into the computer model, we will know what this storm is going to do. And that was a Wednesday night. Thursday morning, it wasn't so much a surprise, but the projections for the hurricane had it staying offshore, but it did not change the rainfall prediction for our area. And at that point, I realized we're looking at the wrong thing. The hurricane is not the threat. It is the upper level low that is coming down through the Tennessee River Valley that's going to slow down, almost stall over the Florida Panhandle. It's going to tap a tropical atmospheric river, and it's going to direct it right into South Carolina.
We've talked about hurricanes, snowstorms, and flooding. Were there perhaps any tornado events that you particularly recall from your years in Columbia?
Oh, yeah. In fact, probably the most memorable one was from a tropical depression, 1994. And it was Hurricane or Tropical Storm Beulah. It hit along the Florida coast, came into Georgia, southwest Georgia, and was heading up toward the Athens area, the center. It happened that we were on the east side at just the right point in the heat of the afternoon. So I went in early to work in preparation for, I guess I got to the station around 11:30. And while Joe Penner, who was doing the weather for the midday show, as he was doing the weather, right after he got off, they issued a tornado warning, and it was for Barnwell County. I thought, tornado warning? Now, keep in mind, back then, the Weather Service had Doppler radar, but we did not. So I'm thinking, okay, so we went on and gave the warning and everything, and I'm looking at everything as best I can, and all of a sudden, they happened to say that there was circulation in Lexington County. It was down near Pelion, I think it was, or something like that. I went, oh my gosh. So I notified the assignment desk. They said, where do we need, do we need to send someone to Pelion? I said, no, don't go to where it's been, go to where it's going to go. So we sent a photographer out on I-20, and I just said, go toward Highway 6, and then we'll see well, he gets to Highway 6, and he misses the turn, has to turn around. When he does, he sees the tornado. And that was the first of something like 28 or 9 tornadoes that day.
Switching gears a little bit, Jim, climate change has been something you're very vocal about. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
It goes back to in 2007. This is when TV stations were starting their websites. Everybody was kind of green back then, so we really didn't know what we were doing, what we wanted to accomplish. And I convinced the TV station. I said, let's do something. Let's start a science and technology page. But I was also at the time on the station's scientists committee. It just so happens that Joe Whitty, a meteorologist who's on the air in Washington, D.C., made a recommendation to Ed Mabeck at George Mason University. And they wanted to see about educating people about climate change. Joe sends a note to the chairman, who was Paul Gross at the time. And Paul then relayed that message to all of us on the committee. And I had just come inside from working out in the yard, and it said on there that they were looking for an advisor. I said, hey, this sounds kind of interesting. So I responded. But a friend of mine on the committee beat me to it. So when I talked to Joe, I said, well, if you need any help or anything like that, just let me know. A few days later, he calls back. He said, how would you like to be the test case? I got the TV station on board. They supported it. The National Science Foundation gave us the grant. And in 2009, ironically, as Climate Gate was breaking, we were meeting in Washington, D.C. to map out a program that would become Climate Matters. The whole focus of our work was to educate people about how the climate is changing and why it's changing and how it's going to affect them locally. We just wanted to give people the scientific information.
What does Columbia, South Carolina mean to you? And then second part of that is, how is retirement life?
I worked here for 34 years, so I consider it to be home. It's also a great place to be. The cost of living here in Columbia is really pretty low in comparison to other parts of the country. And actually, you can say that through a large part of the Carolinas. It's not just Columbia, but in this part of the country, the cost of living isn't that great. So it's a great place to live. So if you don't have a vast wealth, it's a great place to just kind of settle in. As it turns out, I picked the perfect time to retire. I mean, I was already 66, so it wasn't like I was retiring early. So I decided, okay, let's go ahead and retire. This is it. I'll retire, and we'll enjoy life, whatever it is.
Last question, Jim. To wrap this up, what are your words of advice for any future meteorology student or anybody that's currently in the field?
I read something the other day that kind of struck me. It was a young meteorology student who was struggling or had struggled at Florida State, had gone to another college, had some problems there, but was really passionate about weather. And I thought about it because I felt bad that she was struggling, but I sent her a tweet back, and I said, this might surprise you and will surprise some, but I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed. I struggled as well. I often joke that I enjoyed the course atmospheric radiation so much, I took it 3 times. And you just have to work hard and persevere. When I graduated, I wasn't at the top of my class. But my parents instilled a work ethic. If you want something, you got to work for it. So in many cases, I wasn't the best person on the air. Certainly, I wasn't always the best looking person on the air. I don't have the best voice on the air. I don't even know why I'm on the air, but I work harder than anybody. One of my colleagues once said, "You are the hardest working meteorologist I have ever been around." And it's true. When I go to work, I'm there until it's done. 8 hours, 9 hours, 12 hours, it doesn't make any difference. I get the job done. And I always wanted to be the best forecaster.
Very thankful for you to join us tonight. You're still following a little bit of weather. Are you doing any updates on social media? If so, how can folks follow you?
Follow me on Twitter and Facebook at Jim Gandy WX.
That's awesome. Well, Jim, we certainly appreciate it. We hope that you and your wife can get out and travel soon. Hopefully this pandemic mess will come to us soon or end soon, and you can get out there and enjoy the traveling. And we certainly appreciate you joining us tonight. And from all of us here at the Carolina Weather Group, thank you for your service that you've dedicated to the folks of South Carolina over the
thank you. Thank you.
Years.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Everyone, thanks for watching the Carolina Weather Group. We'll see you next time.
Good evening from Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm James Brierton, and this is an all-new episode of the Carolina Weather Group. It's Wednesday, October the 14th, 2020. Here's what's coming up tonight on the Carolina Weather Group. Our guest is Dr. Josh Warman. He invented the Dow, the Doppler on wheels, and he appeared alongside his famed vehicle on numerous TV shows, including Storm Chasers. He's an atmospheric scientist and the president of the Center for Severe Weather Research, that is, and we'll be talking to him coming up in just a moment. We also have on deck for you a check of your forecast with meteorologist Frank Strait. Before we get started tonight, a reminder that the Carolina Weather Group has a new Insiders Club. You can join us on Patreon, patreon.com/Carolina Weather Group, and unlock exclusive extras, including for just $1 a month, video extras and behind the scenes. There are 4 moments from tonight's interview that we weren't able to get into the final edit of the episode you're about to see. So if you want to check those out for just $1, you'll unlock those on Patreon. For $3.99 a month, you'll be getting early access to select videos, including this episode was available early on Patreon, and future select episodes will be made available onto Patreon supporters who pledge us at our full tier of $3.99 a month. If you're already a Patreon supporter, thank you so much for joining us at patreon.com/Carolina Weather Group. If this is the first time you've heard this pitch, rest assured the Carolina Weather Group, our weekly flagship show, is still always going to be free, just like you're about to see a full 30-minute interview as you would on any other week, and our severe weather coverage, as you saw this past weekend, always remains free. We thank those of you who are supporting us on Patreon so that the Carolina Weather Group can continue to grow and bring you the show that you know and love.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Carolina Weather Group. We're happy to have you this evening. Tonight's guest is Joshua Warman. He works at the Center for Severe Weather Research, and you may have seen Josh on a few storm chasing shows on TV. We're going to talk a little bit about that as well tonight with all the research he's been doing lately with the active tropical season and just kind of generally talking about his career. So we're happy to have Josh with us tonight. Towards the end of the show, we'll let Josh give out some information, social media websites. That way you can follow more of his content. So be sure to stick around towards the end of the show for that. So Josh, welcome to the show. We're happy to have you. We'll kind of give you our first question that we ask all of our first-time guests is, how did you get hooked into this this crazy weather world that we all like to follow?
Well, it's been decades for me. You can see all the gray hair here. As a kid, I loved physics and math and things like that. And weather was just always a passion for me. I had a little weather station in my backyard and one of those little Taylor instruments, max-min thermometers, and a weather station. I was old school before the internet. So I always liked weather. It was changing all the time. And it was just a great way to apply my nerdy passions of physics and math to something that was really interesting. A lot of interesting challenges and problems still to be solved. So one way or another, I've been into weather for 50 years.
So Josh, before you got started with the Dow projects and everything that you've been working on recently, you actually used to work with the Air Force on nuclear winter simulations, I guess you could say. Could you tell us a little bit about that? That's something I knew nothing about before doing a quick Google search yesterday.
Wow, I was going to say somebody had some old resume out there.
We'll return to Best of the Carolina Weather Group in a moment. Now your Carolina weather forecast. Here are today's forecast high temperatures for North Carolina. Here are the forecast lows for tonight for North Carolina. Here are tomorrow's forecast high temperatures. And here's forecast rainfall across North Carolina tomorrow. Here are the forecast highs for the day after tomorrow. And here's the forecast rainfall across North Carolina for the day after tomorrow. This is the total rainfall forecast across North Carolina for the next 3 days. Here's the severe thunderstorm outlook for today from the Storm Prediction Center. Here are the forecast high temperatures for today for South Carolina. Here are the low temperatures for today for South Carolina. Here's the probability of precipitation forecast across South Carolina today. And here are the rain chances across South Carolina tonight. Here are tomorrow's forecast highs across South Carolina. Here are the forecast low temperatures for tomorrow for South Carolina. And here is the probability of precipitation across South Carolina tomorrow. Here's the precipitation chances across South Carolina tomorrow night. Here are the forecast highs for the day after tomorrow in South Carolina. Here are the forecast low temperatures across South Carolina for the day after tomorrow. And here are the rain chances across South Carolina for the day after tomorrow. And South Carolina's probability of precipitation for that night. Here's the Storm Prediction Center's severe thunderstorm outlook across South Carolina for today through tonight. Here's the Storm Prediction Center's severe thunderstorm outlook across South Carolina for tomorrow and tomorrow night. And here's the Storm Prediction Center's severe thunderstorm outlook across South Carolina for the day after tomorrow through that night. Here's the severe thunderstorm outlook for today from the Storm Prediction Center. And now, here's a live look at weather radar across the southeast.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Mandy Cohen, Secretary of the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services. And when you follow the 3 W's, you protect your family and your neighbors from COVID-19. When you leave your home, practice your W's. Wear a cloth face covering, wait 6 feet apart, Wash your hands often. Wear, wait, wash. We're in this together. Stay strong, North Carolina.
Fight the spread and take a stand against coronavirus. Wear a mask in public. Stay at least 6 feet apart from others. And get tested. Join us and fight the spread. Visit scdhec.gov/COVID-19.
Getting tested for COVID-19 helps you to take the steps needed to protect yourself, your loved ones, and your community. Find the testing location at scdhec.gov/COVID-19 testing.
Deciding when to wear a mask isn't about who you know or how well you know them. Just ask yourself, will I be with anyone I don't live with? If the answer is yes, get behind the mask. Help slow the spread of COVID-19. Get behind the mask. Learn more at covid19.ncdhhs.gov.
You'll see your Carolina weather forecast at 25 and 55 past. And now back to the best of the Carolina Weather Group on the all-new Carolina Weather Net.